Marvel. Game Maker System by NunuXD Chapter 101-125. Mr. Stark. Apparently Notch was found in San Francisco, California. A robotic voice woke up Tony, who was concentrating while studying a new technology he discovered in Minecraft. Tony didn't have much interest in Minecraft other than the fact that the game apparently managed to bring people's consciousness into a virtual world, but after he started playing Fortnite, and especially after he saw so many interesting things in Oasis, Tony finally decided to pay attention. In Minecraft, and the Industrial Craft mod had 90% of Tony's attention, the other 10% was focused on the game's other mod, which added some spells that Tony only thought were fictional things that Notch created to interest players. Industrial Craft's technology was very strange, while in some parts it was quite confusing and archaic, with equipment extremely complicated to be used in the real world. Other things were quite interesting to him. The quantum suit was one of those things, that despite having a very elegant design with metallic textures in white and green, the usability of this armor had some ideas that not even Tony had thought to apply to his armor, which made him feel at his last 12 hours in his workshop while studying everything he found in that mod. But Jarvis's voice finally snapped Tony's consciousness back to reality. "Jarvis, what did you say?" Tony asked for confirmation, as his tiredness meant he didn't hear until halfway through Jarvis's sentence. Some videos started to circulate on the internet that Notch, the supposed CEO of Mojang, appeared in the real world for the first time, located in San Francisco, California, currently inside the headquarters of Twitch, the livestream game company that he is currently in a meeting with Twitch CEO Emmett Shear. Jarvis repeated patiently. Hearing this, Tony became alert and excited. Without thinking twice, he dropped whatever he was doing and ran to get a red briefcase. The briefcase quickly transformed into an armor that began to hug Tony's body, which soon took off into the sky from his mansion in Malibu. Tony's mansion was 500 kilometers (300 miles) from San Francisco, which for a sports car would take at least 3 hours of travel at high speed, and since Tony didn't know how long Notch would be there, he decided to use the armor to fly and get there as fast as possible. While Tony was flying in the armor, other organizations in the world also received this news and decided to mobilize to the place. While some organizations had good intentions, there were also others that did not intend to act so friendly. Notch and Emmett didn't need much time to discuss. The contract that Emmett made was very clear about his intentions, where even Notch was pleasantly surprised by it, and soon they signed it. Notch didn't intend to just take this money and do nothing, so out of the 30 minutes they spent talking, only 10 minutes were used for the contract, while the next 20 minutes were just spent with Notch giving some directions he had in mind for Twitch to follow. And that he was going to help fund a lot of that, both in monetary terms, if need be, and with system support, which he didn't say for obvious reasons, just saying that Mojang would handle that matter, like the servers for the video platform they would develop within Twitch. They were still at the end of 2011, so despite YouTube being the biggest video platform, it still hadn't become as relevant as it would be in the future, which allowed Twitch to use the influence it was getting with Mojang's games to open the platform to attract content creators. What would further help this would be that Notch intended to link Twitch with Oasis, making it easier for players to watch videos and livestream directly from within the game, and making it easier for them to livestream and stream videos to Twitch instead of competitors. Emmett was very excited about this, and gave Notch his word that he would do everything perfectly, hiring the best developers around the world, with the best salaries to get the video platform ready as soon as possible. "How about we go to a restaurant to celebrate?" Emmett suggested excitedly. Notch thought about it for a while and decided to accept, thinking it would be an interesting experience. Even though Oasis was a lot of fun, he felt that living a little bit in real life was also important. "Sure, why not?" Notch smiled. But soon a voice came through Notch's headset, which he wore only on his left ear. "Notch, a red suit has landed at the entrance to the building just now. I believe it's Tony Stark in a suit." Hearing this, Notch's eyebrow rose in surprise and he continued walking Emmett out of the building, pretending he didn't know. As soon as they reached the ground floor, the two saw Tony getting out of his armor and walking towards them in a bit of a hurry. Upon seeing Notch, looking so similar to the one he saw in Fortnite, Notch was taken aback, but soon replaced that with anger. "Hey you bastard, my lawyers have been looking for you for weeks." Tony yelled as he pointed at Notch, causing Alex to let out a small laugh at the comedy of the situation. "My good friend, Tony Stark, we finally met in person. Did you like the part of the profits I transferred to you?" Notch responded with a smile, ignoring how Tony yelled at him, earning shocked expressions from the people around, and especially from Emmett, who was unaware that Notch was also partnered with Tony Stark. This news was even better than he imagined, as it generated an indirect contact between him and Tony Stark that he had tried to contact for a long time, but was never successful. "What transfer?" Tony was confused while still pointing his finger at Notch, but before Notch could respond, Jarvis's voice came out of the armor. "Mr. Stark, a transfer of $200 million has just arrived in your private account," Jarvis said politely, which made Tony's eyebrow rise. $200 million was not a lot of money for him, but seeing that Notch was true to his word, where he guaranteed that he would transfer a portion of the profits for using Iron Man to promote Fortnite, was a pleasant surprise. "At least you remembered that." Tony snorted as he looked away and lowered the finger he had pointed at Notch. Notch laughed even harder at how Tony was being Tsunere and continued. "Come on, don't lie to me, I've seen Stark Industries stock go up 1.5% since you started live streaming Fortnite, exponentially increasing your relationship with the public and building confidence for investors." Tony was a little embarrassed to hear this, but he tried his best not to show it. A 1.5% increase in the value of Stark Industries was the equivalent of over $400 million in valuation. Added to how much he received from Notch now, Tony received a lot of money without any effort. Seeing that Tony and Notch just stared at each other without saying anything, Emmett was very perceptive in seeing that their relationship wasn't bad and soon butted in. "Mr. Stark, Twitch is very honored to have you here. How about you join Notch and I for a celebratory meal we are having? Despite being early, I booked a room at a great restaurant with delicious light meals to eat at that time." Tony looked at Emmett for the first time, and both from the distance between Emmett and Notch, and both from Emmett's words, he soon deduced what they were doing together and felt it would be interesting to go with them, as he still had some things to talk about with Notch. "Okay, but I don't have a car," Tony explained as he took the red briefcase from him. Notch just smiled and replied, "I have mine." As soon as Notch said this, the yellow Ferrari 458 slowly drove up and parked at the entrance to the building. The first thing that attracted Tony to this car was the appearance of it, as he had never seen this customization on this car, which made him want to customize one of his luxury cars in the same style, but what shocked him even more was seeing that there was no driver in the car. "Did the car come by itself?" Tony asked in surprise, as he thought that only he would be able to do something like that, but that he had never thought of something like that. "Driving alone is not the only thing this car can do," Notch said mysteriously as he approached the car. B was smart and soon opened the door for Notch to get in, which earned some shocked expressions from Tony and Emmett, who were curious about what else this car could do. But before Notch could sit in the car, a loud motorcycle engine noise emerged, alerting Notch and Tony, who looked carefully around for the source of this sound. Looking closely, Notch and Tony saw that on the bike there was a man without a helmet, only wearing a black leather mask that covered his mouth, leaving his long brown hair flying in the wind. But what was most striking about this man was not his appearance, but that he was in the midst of jumping off his motorcycle and pulling a gun from his back. Tony soon understood that the man was there to try to assassinate him or Notch, or maybe even both, so he soon took the red suitcase that the armor was kept and ran to hide while trying to equip the armor. Notch, on the other hand, just pointed his hand forward and strangely caused a block of earth to rise from the ground, hitting the man's face and making him fly away, confused. Emmett, who saw this perfectly, had his mouth dropped open. He figured that Notch had some technology to protect him, but not that he could place an earth block in real life like in Minecraft. Not only was Emmett shocked by this, so were the other dozens of curious people who were looking to see what was going on. Seeing Notch just reach out and make a block of dirt appear just like in Minecraft was an impressive sight. Surprisingly, this only freaked out one or two people, as most were even a little used to it from seeing so much in Minecraft. Despite being hit by the block of earth, the man was agile and used the momentum of the attack to change his position and landed on his feet with the gun pointed at Notch, as if he had never been attacked. With the gun pointed at him, Notch was still quite unconcerned and waved his arm again. This time, instead of just a block of earth that appeared, it was a large wall that rose from the ground and began to slide at high speed towards the man. With Notch in sight to shoot, the man tried to dodge the wall sliding towards him, but was met by another wall that was sliding behind him, wanting to pin him in place. With no other choice, the man had to place the weapon horizontally and use the time it held the walls to get away from there. Taking a knife from his belt, the man was about to jump towards Notch for a hand-to-hand fight, but a robotic voice surprised him. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Tony Stark said in alert, while already having the Iron Man armor equipped. Seeing that Tony was already in the armor, in addition to Notch's strange power, the man knew that his mission could not be completed now and turned to flee. Notch's power that everyone thought he was placing blocks of earth was actually just earth bending from the world of Avatar, which Alex traded for GP and decided to use that as Notch's power, as it wouldn't do any good to use the power of ice while using this persona. Thinking about how well this fit with Notch, Alex was quite excited. Of course, to achieve this mastery, Alex didn't have time to train, so he just spent GP and bought Toph's mastery of earth bending, so he already had the proficiency of a master, without the effort required for it. The biggest contributor to this was Fortnite, which was bringing in hundreds of thousands of GP every day, which was enough to pay for the power upgrades Alex needed, without him having to compromise on the development of Fortnite and the other games. Tony didn't intend to let the man get away, so he used the armor's thrusters to fly after the man, but unfortunately the man's agility while running was too high. Although Tony could fly at insane speeds, the man could run as fast as a sports car, and apparently with help the man managed to escape. Frustrated, Tony returned to the Notch and arrived in time to see the yellow Ferrari pull out with Notch driving and Emmett in the shotgun. Frustrated, Tony just flew on until they parked at a diner. "You didn't even wait for me," Tony complained as he landed and started dismantling the suit. "You already got your ride," Notch said as he pointed to the briefcase in Tony's hand. Tony just huffed in frustration as he looked at the Ferrari enviously, thinking how fun it must be to drive this car. "How many horsepower does this car have? The original I know has 591, it's not possible that you just customized her aesthetics," Tony asked. Notch laughed and replied, "If I say the dynamometer couldn't handle it, would you believe it?" Upon hearing this, Tony's eyes cringed. "You are kidding." Notch just shook his head as he proudly spoke a lie he had made up. "No, the dynamometer at the site I took it with didn't hold up, but I'm guessing it has over 1,500 horsepower. Tony was even more tempted to buy such a car and customize it in the same way, both aesthetically and mechanically. As they talked and got ready to eat, in New York, a black man wearing a black coat and an eye patch was looking at the large screen in front of him angrily. On the screen was a man trying to murder Notch, who they had just discovered a few minutes ago was in San Francisco. How did I not get this news as soon as he showed up? The paranoid man started thinking and worrying. And to make him even more worried, Notch obviously placed a block of dirt just like players did in Minecraft, only in real life. Maybe Notch was a mutant, or maybe he just had powers, or even he was an alien. All the possibilities that Fury thought about only made him worry even more about this mysterious man, leading him to be sure that he needed to accelerate the Avengers' plan, since the Earth needed powerful people to protect humans. Fortunately, alongside Notch there was the best candidate today, Tony Stark. What Fury didn't know is that maybe Earth didn't need the heroes as much as he thought, mostly because of Mojang. Video of Notch fighting the mystery killer in the real world quickly went viral. Seeing that Notch was using Minecraft powers in real life made many players also try to place blocks, but unfortunately they couldn't. Even on Twitter, the top one on trending topics was a post from players asking Notch to also teach them how to place blocks in real life. While for ordinary people this publication seemed like a simple thing, just the internet messing around as they always did, another group of people saw it in a different way. Ha ha ha, finally humanity is seeing the superiority of mutants. An old man wearing a red helmet was laughing as he listened to these people's tweets as they spoke of Notch's powers. Despite not knowing the origin of Notch with much certainty, Magneto had no doubt that this man was a mutant, since only a mutant like them could have such beautiful and magnificent power. Were you able to find any information about this? His name is Notch. Mystique added. Some information on this Notch, thanks. Magneto continued. Mystique thought for a while and replied. So far, the only information we know is that he is the creator of Minecraft, Fortnite Battle Royale and Fortnite Oasis. The revenue he has received so far is already estimated to be over $1 billion, but nobody knew even what he looked like in real life up until 40 minutes ago. Thinking for a while, Magneto remembered something. Probably Charles should know this Notch, as he has a machine that can locate mutants. Maybe we should pay Charles a little visit and use the Cerebro to find Notch ourselves. With the strength and money he has, it will just be a matter of time until mankind is dominated by us. While Magneto raved about making Notch his subordinate, Charles Xavier was frustrated that their jet was on a mission halfway across the country, which wouldn't have enough time to go back and find Notch, who he also believed was a mutant, as well, like Magneto. Despite not being able to feel Notch in his brain, he compared Notch to Alex, who he had only recently met, and realized that the two's powers were very different. While Alex needed the magic circles to use magic, Notch just waved his hand and the earth moved, much more like mutant powers, leaving the possibility of him being a mage much less. The biggest disappointment for the professor was that Notch was not bald like he was in real life. When he first met Notch in Minecraft and saw Notch's skin's long hair, Xavier thought that he was also bald in real life, as bald people preferred to put hair in the game, as it was the only place they could have hair. But seeing that Notch also had long hair in real life made Professor Xavier very frustrated. Wait, maybe he developed something to stop being bald, that's why he just showed up now. Xavier came up with a crazy theory, out of desperation at being bald for so many years. This theory had no basis at all, but thinking about the possibility of having hair again was very tempting. He could have hair whenever he wanted, but for that he would have to give up using his powers, since his mental powers were so powerful that it inhibited the growth of hair on his head. I must contact Notch urgently. Professor was excited by this crazy idea and thought about how he could get in touch with this famous man. While everyone was trying to get in touch with him, Notch had already said goodbye to Tony and Emmett and returned to his cabin, now looking like Alex again. When he saw what people were talking about on Twitter he started laughing. Do people want to learn to use powers like Notch? Alex laughed. I think I can do this on a small scale. How about adding a mutants mod to Minecraft? That way people can get used to having powers in the game, while I lessen the prejudice they have towards mutants. Alex remembered how uncomfortable Anna had felt while texting that someone had called her a freak. With this mod, Alex would both say that he didn't abandon Minecraft, and would also give an answer to players who wanted to have powers. With players used to having powers, when Alex launches his MMORPG and people start to have powers in real life, the world wouldn't become as chaotic as they would be more used to it. Now, which powers should I choose? Alex asked himself as he started to develop the basic stuff for this mod he was going to release. The mod would be paid, of course, only costing $3, something that wasn't that expensive for players, but it didn't seem to be free either. For the fanatical Minecraft players and the players who didn't like Fortnite very much, they can get a great new experience in the game. I might even put in some NPCs that will hand out quests to players to increase the amount of hours they'll play the mod, as well as make it available for them to play however they want. Alex thought with a lot of ideas for the mod. The only thing he hadn't decided yet was which powers to use, since he didn't want extremely powerful powers, which would become the meta, but he also didn't want to just put useless powers. Making powers with a lot of visual effects was the norm, even if it was a power that increased the player's speed. Putting some motors on the player's leg like Ida's legs from My Hero Academia would make the power look much more fun. Thinking about this anime, Alex had a lot of ideas to use from scratch, while still thinking about what else he could use. When Alex finally planned how he was going to develop the mod for Minecraft, he turned the computer back on. He was startled by the screen that appeared. As this computer was magical, Alex was used to turning the computer off when he wasn't home and turning it back on when he got back, or even turning it off when he went to sleep, mainly because of the monitor light that disturbed his sleep while he was lying down. So this was one of the times this happened, but when he turned on the computer this time, instead of having to wait just 2 seconds for the computer to turn on, it had already been 15 seconds and the computer was still charging. Paying attention to what was written on the screen, Alex was shocked. Update in progress. Update. Alex was surprised, he didn't know that the computer could update. With the features it had, he already felt that this was more than enough for him, but who knew the computer would update at some point? I wonder what can come of functionality. I can already make games, I can already release the games in the world, I can already get powers with the GP I earn for the games. I can't think of anything else that can come of functionality, Alex said, confused as he swiveled around in his chair. Curious, Alex got up from the computer and went to see how B was doing, if everything was fine with the game server, but arriving in B's big room, Alex saw that everything was working fine. B was even racing with other players in Oasis, with everything working perfectly. Deciding to try something else, Alex held out his hand and a magic circle appeared there, which meant he was still able to control magic without any problems. I think it's a good thing. Alex at least was more relaxed about it because none of it was deducted from the system. Returning home, Alex saw that the update loading bar was already finishing, so he sat down and waited patiently. 98%, 99%, 100%. When the update bar was finally complete, Alex smiled excitedly and looked at the desktop looking for any changes, and there it was. In addition to the icons he was used to, like the program to make games and the program to view game statistics, an icon he had never seen appeared. Worlds. Seeing the name of this app, Alex had a mental idea of what it could be, but didn't dare guess. Opening the application, he saw that his assumption was right. Marvel Universe. Opening square bracket question mark closing square bracket. In the application there were only 2 options for him to click on, and of those options, one of them was the world he was in while the other was just a bunch of questions without any description. Clicking on Marvel Universe, Alex saw a window with some information. Marvel Universe. A world from the Marvel Comics universe, a mix between people from comics, movies, series and cartoons. Among the millions of versions that exist of this universe, this is the Earth 888 version. Alex was surprised by this. He knew few Marvel universes, and among those universes he knows, Universe 888 was never one of them, so he really had no idea what he could find here. Curious to know what this world with several question marks was, Alex clicked. An unknown universe. It is still not known which reality this is part of. It can be a world known to the host through comics, drawings, anime, movies, books, web novels, or any other form of art, or it can also happen to be a world unknown to the host. By clicking on this option, a portal will appear where the host can connect their home to that world at any time. Upon reading this description, Alex was surprised. From what he understood, this can not only lead to other Marvel universes, but also to other universes like DC, anime or even books. Should I click that option? Alex wondered, a little unsure. He didn't know what could happen, or what he might find. If I click on that, I can open up another untapped player market. Even though the Marvel universe is a pretty big place, while I still haven't figured out how to take games to other planets, I'm limited to just 7 billion people, and considering that Fortnite is close to hitting 1 billion players, I'm already pretty close to the limit that I can receive here. Alex started to weigh whether this would be worth it. Of course, it's not like I'm getting low on points. If I release a game for $20 and sell that to 1 billion people, that would already earn me 100 million GP, which is already an astronomical amount, but considering the investment what I'll have to do to get there and the time it will take to reach it, it's not a bad idea to open a portal to another universe. The main thing that made Alex think about it was Minecraft, that despite Fortnite already having almost 1 billion players, Minecraft had not yet reached 150 million, that being the big difference between a free game and a paid game. But he was still in doubt, whether it would be better to click to open a new universe now, or whether it would be a better idea to do this in the future. Fortnite was starting to pay off for now, so he didn't need to be afraid of not having enough GP for now, but while the points needed to develop Oasis were very high, when that was ready it would speed up the development of other things a lot. There are such expensive things in the GP shop, like time dilation. Alex thought about the things he wanted, but he knew it would take a long time to buy and he was in doubt, not knowing how he would decide. Nunu note, how would you decide? Okay, it doesn't hurt to try, right? Alex has finally made up his mind. Although the development in the world of Marvel was already faster than he imagined, at some point this would limit the speed with which he could get GP. Of course, he was still far from that and had no intention of developing a game industry in another world currently. My current focus is on dealing with the world of Marvel. The amount of trouble and tragedy that will happen here is unimaginable. This is my main world where all my players are and I feel it is part of my duty to protect these people so that they can keep playing my games. It would suck if Thanos managed to snap his finger and all of a sudden I lost half my players. Alex finally understood. Now no longer indecisive, he used the mouse to click on the option to open another portal. Nothing changed. Looking around confused, Alex thought of the cave he found that led him to the world of Marvel and understood that probably another cave like that had arisen. Curious, Alex left the house and went to B's room. Hey B, want to go for a walk? I'm going to an unknown world, it would be nice to have company. Alex said as he looked at B, who parked his car in the Oasis world and immediately logged out of the game. Yes. What world is this? Is this the world I came from? B asked curiously. Alex just shook his head. I still don't know, it could either be the world you came from, or it could be another world I already know, or it could also be a world I've never heard of. It's basically an adventure with an unknown destination. Hearing this, B got even more excited as he walked out of the room and looked at Alex expectantly. Are we going by GTR or Ferrari? B said in an excited voice. Alex thought for a moment and shook his head. The two are very beautiful, you can decide. Hearing that, B didn't think twice and changed his appearance to the GTR while transforming into car mode. I like the GTR better, B said with a little embarrassment. Alex chuckled and climbed into the driver's seat. While they were still in the snowy forest at Alex's house, B kept the suspension very high, as if it were an off-road car while using thicker tires, which helped a lot with maneuverability in this type of terrain. Heading towards the previous cave, Alex began to look around with the windows down while using Elven breath to try to sense breaths of life from somewhere else, the same way he did to find this current cave. When passing through Marvel's cave, Alex felt the breath of life coming from the cave normally and just ignored it, continuing to drive around, until he felt it again, coming from somewhere else. Changing direction via the steering wheel, Alex continued driving slowly until he spotted another cave. He was sure that this cave had not been here before, and from the aura of life that radiated through this cave, he was sure that this was the portal to the other world. Come on B, try to make less noise as we don't know where we're going. Alex said cautiously as he closed the window and drove carefully. B understood and drowned out the car's exhaust. From the extremely loud noise he used previously, to practically the nearly silent noise of a Tesla. That sporty bodykit GTR driving without making any noise was very strange, but the two just ignored it and looked at the end of the tunnel curiously. Finally reaching the light, just like in the Marvel world, they came out in a forest. Do you feel anything, B? Alex asked. B took 5 seconds before answering. This is not my world, I can't get in touch with any of the other Autobots. Okay, so we have to be more careful. Alex commented as he drove slowly through the trees. To help find something, Alex opened the windows again and tried to feel someone with elven breath, but only after 10 minutes he could feel something. I think I found something, B. Alex said in a low voice as he altered the direction he was driving to go where he felt it. Strangely, as time passed, that feeling of life that the elven breath showed him was disappearing. Is he running away? Alex wondered, confused as he accelerated further. There's someone lying ahead, Alex, but he appears to be dead. B commented in a low voice over the car's sound system. It looks like a human. Curious, Alex looked up and saw what B was saying. Lying on the ground, there were 2 dead people. The 2 had the same hair color, a very bright red, but what caught Alex's attention the most was something on the foreheads of these people. Is that a ninja headband? Alex recognized that easily. Coming closer, Alex saw that it really was a ninja headband, and in the center of the headband was a drawing of a spiral. I think this is from the Uzumaki clan, so we come to the world of Naruto. But if they are from the Uzumaki clan, that means this is a timeline long before the main storyline begins. Seeing those corpses on the ground, who had apparently died just a few hours ago, Alex felt the cruelty of this world. Even though Marvel's world was very dangerous, it was still a society with rules and laws, but if this really is Naruto's world, then it's much more dangerous here than I'm prepared for. Despite having divine aim like Deadshot or the magical powers of Grey Fullbuster, this still isn't close enough to deal with monsters like Jinchuriki or the village Cage who can practically erase a country in the blink of an eye, since all here are assassins trained to kill from childhood. Let's go B, I think we still need more preparation to interact with this world. Alex told B as he turned the wheel and headed back the way they came. When Alex felt through the elven breathing that there were some living beings coming towards them, he accelerated even more while dodging the trees and going back as fast as possible. B sensed the urgency in Alex's tone and cooperated with him. Fortunately, for someone with as good a driving skill as Dominic Toretto, dodging those trees with a car as good as the B was relatively easy. When they finally got back home, Alex finally calmed down. What world was that, Alex? B asked, confused as she reverted to his robotic form. A very dangerous world. Their children are trained to kill from the age of 6, and those who lack talent are treated like cattle by the powerful people, dying for the dumbest reasons and waging wars for the sake of greed. Alex commented. It looks like Cybertron, B replied in a slightly sad voice. I'm sorry, B. Alex realized he'd said something offensive and apologized. Don't worry, I wasn't sad about what you said, but about my people's situation, so I want to help them. B replied while shaking her head. Don't worry, when it's in my power I'll do what I can to help you and your people. I believe Tony will also be able to help in a few years. With his knowledge it's possible that some useful ideas will come up. Alex commented, making B feel more relaxed. Thanks, Alex. Meanwhile, beside the corpses of the 2 Uzumaki clan members they found dead, 2 people emerged. Damn it, we didn't make it in time. One girl said in frustration and anger as she looked at the corpses of her relatives. Don't get so angry, Maiko. As much as I hate to see it too, a war is approaching. We must keep our minds calm and analyze the situation in the best way. If we don't do that our clan could be exterminated. A man, also with red hair, sighed. But Hisoka-sensei, we didn't harm anyone, why did they want to destroy us so much? Maiko said in frustration as she held back her tears. Hisoka just shook his head. Because we have something they don't have, and if they can't have it, they'd rather nobody have it. The years to come will be very troubled for us. We must get stronger to protect our family, remember that, Maiko. Yes, Hisoka-sensei. Maiko said seriously. While Maiko was distracted by the death of these ninja, Hisoka noticed the strange footprint marks on the ground. Wait here a moment. Hisoka said in a serious voice as he decided to follow the footprints on the ground, which looked like a carriage. Although it resembles a chariot, it's still not that close, maybe it's from some beast that was attracted by the scent. Hisoka wondered as he followed this cautiously. After a few minutes of running, Hisoka finally reached the end of the footprints. But strangely, these footprints disappeared near a mountain. As a good Fuinjutsu master, Hisoka tried every way to look for something hidden here, but found nothing. Perhaps I am too worried. Hisoka wondered as he looked around and tried to come up with a hypothesis of what could have happened. Or maybe they did it on purpose. He couldn't understand it, but after a while he gave up and decided to tell this to the patriarch. But little did he know that where he was currently, a few minutes ago there was a large cave that acted as a portal to another world, but that would be a magic that they couldn't understand in such a short time. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. After talking with B for a few hours, Alex felt an urge to get stronger, both to protect the players in his games and to be strong enough not to be afraid to travel to other worlds. From what he saw at System, he wouldn't be limited to just developing games for the Marvel world, or even just the Naruto world he just discovered. Probably when another goal was achieved he would unlock other worlds to travel to, but that wouldn't do any good if he didn't have enough strength to protect himself in that other world. Let's speed up earning money. Fortnite is currently developing in a practically organic way. The only thing I have to do is develop a few more skins for players after a few months and every 2 or 3 months do another battle pass, to keep players entertained with the game, plus a few other events that won't necessarily require my presence. Alex began formulating plans. Available gaming points, 6.100.000. Looking at his total amount of gaming points, Alex started calculating how long it would take him to reach the 10 million needed to turn Oasis into a virtual hub for all his games, and he realized that as long as he didn't spend anything, he could do this within 4 to 6 days, depending on how fast Fortnite and Minecraft were still making money. Okay, considering the money I spent on earthbending powers, Mystique's ability to shapeshift so she can roam freely in the real world as Notch, and the GP I'm going to spend to develop the Minecraft Mutants mod, speed is still above expectations. Alex understood this and became confident. With the hub finished, he already felt that developing single-player games would greatly accelerate the speed with which he received money. Despite these games being niche and not able to sell as many copies as Minecraft or attract as many players as Fortnite, selling each copy of the game for $20 would be enough to earn Alex several million GP quickly, thus potentially accelerating the speed he could reach. Improve. I can use single-player games to attract more players and gather more GP, and use that to develop my MMORPG. With this MMORPG I can already make humanity stronger to the point where they can protect themselves during the attacks and disasters that will happen in the future. Alex said to himself as he wrote down the plans he thought of. With all this already planned, Alex began to put these ideas into practice. The first step was to develop the Minecraft Mutants mod. Thinking about the world of Naruto and the ideas he had for My Hero Academia, Alex has already sorted out some interesting powers and started setting it all up. When he finally finished these settings, Alex intended to develop a storyline for the players to follow and enjoy, experimenting with the powers until the end where he would surprise the players. With the release of Fortnite, the amount of players in Minecraft decreased. But considering that more than 100 million copies were sold, the total amount of players online was still very high, not to mention that Fortnite also served to attract new players to Minecraft, which made the relationship between the two games quite symbiotic. At that time, in Hypixel, Ned was walking with Peter and Hulk. "You really didn't like Fortnite, did you, Hulk?" Ned said as he shook his head. At that time he was not live. "Hulk doesn't like guns, only Smash," Hulk said in frustration as he remembered what it felt like to be hit by weapons in real life, and how it had left him a little traumatized. Already in Minecraft he could just focus on breaking things and destroying everything with his fists. "I'm not too fond of guns either, Hulk, don't worry," Peter said with a smile as he placed his hand on their green-skinned friend's shoulder. The relationship between the three developed very well. Although Ned and Peter didn't know Hulk personally, They saw Hulk as a child, and treated Hulk that way, something that made Hulk very happy. Hearing Petter say that he didn't like guns either, Hulk opened a big smile and was happy. Seeing the two getting along made Ned laugh. Hey, but have you noticed that it's becoming more common to see people wearing skins looking like magicians? Even some people are wearing magician hats. Ned commented after looking around them, causing Petter and Hulk to look curious as well. Hulk sees a lot of people like that. Hulk commented as he looked at a girl wearing a pink witch dress with a big hat and with several men around her vying for her attention. Petter saw it too and remembered something he heard in school. Hey Ned, remember what Todd was talking about at school yesterday? I think it has something to do with it. Ned had to think for a while before he remembered. Are you talking about the School of Magic they're doing here at Hypixel? Yes, it seems that a player named Wong bought the Witchcraft DLC when it was released and put a lot of effort into studying it. Then after he found other players who were also studying it together, they decided to make a magic group, so with more and more people interested, it looks like they've turned it into a wizarding school. Petter explained what he heard, both for Ned to remember and for Hulk to understand what they were talking about. How cool. Would they accept us to learn magic with them? Ned was interested, thinking it would be cool to use magic. When this DLC was released he found it interesting, but he was so focused on playing Skyblock that after a while he forgot about it. I think they would accept it, but they say it's quite difficult to learn magic since the DLC was released without any tutorials, so players are still exploring it on their own and learning things little by little. Petter explained, also a little interested. Hulk can also learn. Hulk asked, surprising them both. Ned and Petter stared at each other, until Petter answered. They say they accept everyone, but if you're going to learn, Hulk, you have to be calm. If you yell at someone they might kick you out. Hulk is very calm. Hulk said proudly. Hulk wants to learn magic too. So let's go, it sounds interesting to learn magic in Minecraft. Ned said excitedly as he walked towards the people in wizard clothes. So the three of them headed towards the magic school. What Ned and Petter didn't know is that Hulk had no idea what magic was, but just wanted to go be with the only friends he had. And getting Hulk interested in magic would have a big effect on the future, something no one imagined could happen. Is this magic usable in the real world? The Ancient One asked Wong curiously as she looked at the magic he was demonstrating for her in Minecraft. Wong was a little embarrassed hearing her question, but he was still quite excited. So far we haven't been able to make an application of this in the real world, but considering the concepts of magic in this game, and the way that Notch used earth manipulation in those videos that appeared, I believe that this really is possible, so much so that I have already started to try to develop a way to experience this, but it's not really set in stone yet, as our knowledge of this magic is still very slim considering the amount of things we haven't figured out yet. Wong respectfully explained. Of course, that's why I decided to call Master here, as her knowledge of magic is much deeper than mine, maybe it will speed up our research. Hearing that, the Ancient One raised an eyebrow with a bit of surprise. Since Mojang appeared in the world, she is getting surprised more and more often, as for some reason she couldn't see the future of this company, nor calculate what this company could cause of changes in the world for the future. On the one hand this was quite worrying, but on the other hand she was feeling more and more interested in it. Besides you, how many other disciples are studying this magic? She asked. Wong thought for a while but soon came up with an exact number. Currently there are 37 disciples of Kamar Taj studying this magic, including some elders who became interested after I told them about the development and the possibilities it could bring to our study. The Ancient One nodded her head and started walking through the school of magic they had done while thinking about something. Wong didn't interrupt her thought and just followed silently. After a complete tour of the wizarding school, another question arose. I counted 72 people studying this magic, do you know anything about them? She asked. Wong shook his head. Actually the total number of students is 388, but most are not online at that time. I have little information about them, since the identity of players in Minecraft is secret. I couldn't find out anything very important about most of them, just some students caught my attention. he said while opening his friends list and showing the name of some players, as well as their Minecraft character profile picture. These 3 players got me interested. 2 of them are apparently friends and have some very developed concepts of magic, something that's hard to believe comes from just one regular person. So I talked to them and found out that they're both fanatical RPG players, a very common style of play among young people, where they use their imagination to invent a fictional world and create stories and adventures around it. Apparently the 2 players control characters who are wizards in the style they call min-max, something who apparently studies the game as much as possible to be able to use magic most efficiently without breaking the rules. Wong patiently explained. Hearing his explanation, Ancient One was quite surprised. With that concept they would be very promising students of Kamar Taj, probably able to become grandmasters in a short time. They must be people quite adored in this game called RPG. She said with a smile. Wong nodded in agreement, not knowing how hated min-max players were in the tabletop RPG community. And the last student, what made him interesting? She asked curiously. This last student has the nickname Strange, and he is very similar to his nickname. Since initially he had no interest in magic, always bragging about how rich he was, or things like that, but when one of the students defeated him in a PvP duel by betting a car using magic, Strange became quite enraged and began to study magic with great dedication, demonstrating a great talent for it. Incredibly many of the group's discoveries came from him, even discovering more than some Grand Masters of Kamar Taj. Wong explained with a little embarrassment. Hearing that player's nickname, the Ancient One's eyes visibly shrank, startling Wong into thinking he had said something wrong. When she said there was something to do urgently and disconnected, he was even more worried that he had said something bad. But she didn't even think about it and logged out of the game without a second thought. Holding the Eye of Agamotto around her neck, the necklace that held the Gem of Time, the Ancient One began to use her magic to try to read the future again, but this time focusing on Stephen Strange, her disciple who, according to destiny, was supposed to assume the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme in a few years. Seeing the result of that, her heart fluttered. It's different, she whispered. His future has changed. Since he came into contact with Minecraft, the timeline he was supposed to develop in has changed. Looking more closely, she noticed that the future was more confusing than before, but this time she didn't give up and used a lot of magic to try to force to see Stephen's future. With a lot of effort, the time gem only managed to glimpse small parts of Stephen's future, but what she saw made her jaw, a woman of more than 400 years old, drop in amazement. Stephen was sitting in Sorcerer Supreme's chair, just as she could see earlier, still wearing the flying cape he would receive in the future, as well as the Eye of Agamotto around his neck, but what shocked her was that he wasn't alone. In front of him was another Stephen Stranger with a sheet of paper while throwing some dice on the table. In front of that Stephen was another Stephen, but looking very pale and with a third eye open on his forehead, looking at Stephen in the Sorcerer Chair Supreme angrily as he ripped a sheet of paper resembling Stephen's in front of him, and next to them there was even a female version of Stephen laughing at them while kissing a pair of colored dice in her hand. Other people might think that these Stephens were brothers or something, but with her knowledge, the Ancient One knew that these people were not the Stephen she knew, but other versions of him from other multiverses. What made it all even more shocking is that in the corner of the room there was a square-looking Stephen like Minecraft who was caressing a small egg very carefully. If just the Stephens from other multiverses gathered together playing a game she had never seen in her life was enough for the Ancient One to be shocked, seeing a Minecraft version of them made a big question mark pop up in her head. WTF. Hi everyone, Nunu here. I needed some time to organize myself with this story. Your help in the comments, both from readers of the free sites and from readers who support me on Patreon, was essential. Now that Mojang is already quite developed in the Marvel world, the development of this story will be greatly improved, so Chapter 01 of the story has finally come to an end. Thanks for the Power Stones, comments, favorites, and everyone who added the story to the library. This support is critical to the development of the story on all sites. Chapter 02 will begin next. I count on your support, I hope you like it. Hi everyone, Nunu here. I needed some time to organize myself with this story. Your help in the comments, both from readers of the free sites and from readers who support me on Patreon, was essential. Now that Mojang is already quite developed in the Marvel world, the development of this story will be greatly improved, so Chapter 01 of the story has finally come to an end. Thanks for the Power Stones, comments, favorites, and everyone who added the story to the library. This support is critical to the development of the story on all sites. Chapter 02 will begin next. I count on your support, I hope you like it. Game Maker System, Chapter 02. With Mojang's investment in Twitch, the visibility that Fortnite and Minecraft were receiving was steadily increasing. Currently Twitch was not only a livestream site but also had a session for users to post videos, which made the site's popularity skyrocket even more, especially after Notch advised Emmett to add a session for short vertical videos for users to watch it on their cell phones. For the time being this session was not as popular as the livestreams or long horizontal videos session, as smartphones were still relatively new and few people had them, but still, even for computer users it was already quite interesting to watch the short videos, and without them realizing it, hours had passed and they had watched hundreds of these videos. Another big incentive for content creators was that they could use the snippets of the livestreams they made on the site, edit that on the site itself and post it as a standalone video, which could yield a high income for these people. Considering that people all over the world were watching videos and livestreams on this site, executives from various companies soon saw the advertising potential that this had and soon began investing large amounts of money to promote their brand in advertisements on this site, which resulted into a high income for content creators, which generated more people interested in producing content wanting to earn money, and finally this became a big snowball. Alex was amazed at how fast this market was growing compared to his old world, which only had such a huge boom in audiences around the year 2015, but in this world it was only 2012 and this trend was already almost becoming as big as in the previous world. Another thing that Alex advised Emmett to do was that unlike his previous world where Twitch took 50% of the profits and left only 50% for the creators, in this world this was changed to 20% for Twitch and 80% for the creators, as the cost of maintaining the site was very low thanks to Mojang's system, which encouraged even more creators to join the platform, and incredibly increased Twitch's income even more than when it received 50% of the profit. Looking at the performance of Fortnite and Minecraft, Alex was also extremely satisfied, especially when he saw that this morning he had reached 10 million GP, allowing him to finally be able to separate Oasis from Minecraft and Fortnite. For this change, Alex did it in a pretty low-key way, just rolling this out via an update in the player's software. Whereas previously they had to download Fortnite and Minecraft separately to gain access to both games, now the player only needed to download a game called Oasis, and within the game the player could access Fortnite or buy Minecraft through the interface. The players were very surprised when they saw this change, especially with the very beautiful and elegant design that Alex had adopted for the Oasis brand. What attracted players' attention even more was that unlike before where they had to wait a few seconds to switch between Minecraft and Oasis, now this transfer was instantaneous. A couple of portals popped up around Oasis where players could walk through that and connect into the world of Minecraft right away. More is a place for players to find other players with a common interest so that the community could be strengthened, but of course, there was still the option where the player could enter the game directly through the menu anywhere in Oasis. This update was very well received by players, as for them, the more practical the game was, the better it would be. And that reflected in the revenue that the games were generating. Both Minecraft had a jump in the amount of sales that it was getting, and Fortnite also had a lot more players spending on Battle Pass or buying skins to look better, both in the game and in Oasis. New stores also appeared in Oasis, where even Stark Industries also had a branded store where players could visit and learn about the technology they developed there, both about the arc reactor energy technology, as well as a place to players to experience Iron Man's boots and gloves that appeared in Fortnite, which made more people around the world better understand Tony Stark's mind. The dislike players felt towards Tony for being a distant billionaire they could never catch up with significantly lessened after players had fun playing around with some of Iron Man's armor gear, which greatly increased the popularity of this American hero around the world. Other brands were also renting stores in Minecraft at very high prices when they saw how useful this would be for them, especially when they saw that users who tried on clothes in Oasis had a high conversion rate of sales for similar products in real life, even more so with the option that Mojang developed so that users could buy products in the game and that this would arrive at their home in real life by mail, making e-commerce even more developed in this world, since despite being an e-commerce, it still maintained the feeling of shopping in a real store. Of course, this was all great for Alex, as Mojang took a percentage of the sales of every product that players bought through Oasis, in addition to the rent from the stores, which greatly increased Alex's GP gain after that. Surprisingly, even martial arts schools, magic schools, and even power testing environments were popping up in Oasis and Minecraft. Some of the more harmless powers from the Mutants mod that Minecraft had released were available for players to experience in Oasis, such as the power of teleportation, the power of telekinesis, and even the power to run at high speeds, could be used in Oasis, which made humans who had a dislike for mutants feel that this was no longer something exclusive to these blessed people, and that in Oasis everyone could be like them, causing the sense of oppression that mutants felt had greatly diminished. Even in real life, where the X-Men were quite hated, now there were people who asked them to show some of their powers in real life so they could see it in person, which left the X-Men quite confused and happy with this news. Attacks by mutant terrorists like the Brotherhood had not subsided, but now instead of hating all mutants, now the hatred of humans was more focused only on these terrorists than on all mutants. There were even reports of parents of children who hoped to awaken mutant powers in real life, so they could feel special, something that some parents hated, but that part of the population could already see with a much better vision. In 2 months, Oasis had become a much better world, where poor people could have a much happier and more enjoyable life, and rich people could experience things that money could never buy in real life. Even the school of magic that had appeared in Minecraft had developed much more, now with more than 10,000 students actively studying the very mysterious magic that had appeared in the witchcraft mod of Minecraft, which also had some harmless spells that could be used in Oasis. The population of Oasis, which previously stood at just 900 million people, had now finally reached a total of 3 billion users around the world. For a world with a population of almost 7 billion people, this represented almost 50% of the entire world population that had at least experienced this mystical new world. And Alex, the developer of all this, was currently working on the development of the new game. Looking at the date on the calendar, Alex knew the date for the invasion of New York was very close. Even though he knew that Thor was currently playing with the Mjolnir that Notch had given him in Oasis, Alex didn't doubt that the invasion would still happen. Even if Loki wasn't the cause of all this, maybe someone else could be, so Alex felt that it was necessary for him to take precautions for this. In those 2 months he had stored a large amount of GP, not only so that he could buy various powers for him to use to protect the Earth and develop a new game, but he also intended to separate a part of that GP so that the players of his games could rescue game powers for real life. This transaction cost GP, so Alex's goal during these months was to develop Oasis to yield the highest amount of GP possible, so even though players spend a lot of GP to redeem powers in real life, with a limit of course, the game still yielded more GP than it spent, which would make this development profitable in the long run, despite the monstrous expenses. Even if players spend a lot of GP, as long as I continue to develop games and improve Oasis, that revenue can always maintain a balance with much more GP coming in through player spending than going out through redeeming their powers. Alex thought excitedly as he continued to set up the next game. The focus for the next game should not be fancy powers, but simpler and more discreet powers, so players can have a higher survival rate with the invasion, as some can also help protect the world. Looking at the next game project that was already 80% complete, Alex was quite satisfied. In just a few days the game will finally be ready, so income can get another boom, Alex thought. I just hope that's enough. While Alex was developing the new game, a tall, muscular white man was having a conversation with a bald black man. So you mean that now people can live in a virtual world? The white man asked with a lot of confusion. Yes, it's not like this is something normal, it's just that recently someone managed to develop this new technology and currently a part of the population has already started to adopt this new world as part of their routine. Nick Fury sighed as he explained. The future has really evolved a lot. Was this done by a Stark? Steve Rogers asked while remembering his friend who had many innovative ideas in his time. Thinking about something so innovative like that, Steve could only think that this was something that was done by a Stark, either Howard Stark, or a son of Howard, since that man's mind was something he could never understand. No, initially we also thought this could have been done by Tony Stark, Howard's son, but we soon found out that this is something even Tony Stark couldn't do with today's technology. This game, or rather world, uses a technology that we have no idea how it works. As soon as you put this world on your computer and click to enter, it's as if your mind has been teleported there and you will feel all the real sensations as if you were there in person. The best hypothesis we have so far is that this world uses some form of hypnosis, but we don't have any evidence to back that up. Nick explained seriously. Hearing Nick's hypothesis, Steve soon understood that if this was done with bad intentions, probably half of the world's population could die instantly, which made the hairs on his arms immediately stand on end. Thankfully whoever did this didn't show any ill intent. Steve sighed a little relieved. Not yet, but few people have met the mastermind behind this world, and even fewer have met this man in the real world, most of his appearances being only in the virtual world he created, where he acts practically as a rampant god. Nick responded with a bit of acid in his voice. Steve understood Nick's reasoning, but despite being worried about this new world, the goodness in his heart prevented him from being prejudiced against a person who so far had not made any mistakes. In his mind, it was like the parable of baby Hitler. Would it be fair to kill a baby, even if in the future that baby was the greatest genocide in history? For many people there was no doubt that this would be completely fair, but for Steve, who had his justice amplified by the super soldier serum, it didn't seem like something an ordinary person could do. Was it this man who made Clint as powerful as he is? Steve asked curiously. Clint Barton, better known as Hawkeye, was one of the first friends Steve made while he was training at the SHIELD gym. Since the two's strength was far greater than that of normal people, the two became sparring partners in no time, as only one could be the other's sparring partner. Even though Steve won 99% of the fights they had, at least against Clint he didn't have to hold back as much as he did against normal people. Yes, there was an event where a virtual city was being invaded by the brother of that world's creator, and the citizens of that city were supposed to fight to protect the place. The person who contributed the most to the city's protection received a golden apple that doubled the strength whoever ate it. That's why Clint got so powerful. Nick explained. A virtual city was being attacked. I never thought I'd be hearing this in my life, haha. Steve laughed at the irony of imagining that people were fighting to protect a place that didn't even exist. What made him very proud when Nick was showing the footage of the attack on this city is that not only were there military personnel protecting the place as he was used to in war, but there were also ordinary people fighting to protect it. The feeling of seeing millions of people fighting together for an ideal made Steve's soldier's blood boil, wishing he could be in that place fighting alongside all those people. From what he saw, there were men, women, teenagers, who despite the clear difference in color, race, gender, nationality, were united fighting a common enemy. If this were in the real world, would people be able to put their differences aside to be able to fight side by side against such an enemy? Steve thought with a smile as he imagined this scene. Across the country, Thor and the Asgardian warriors lay connected in Oasis, drunk while laughing with a group of players who were chatting and laughing about the different stories they had around the world. As in Oasis there was no language barrier, all players could speak and understand each other perfectly. Talking to people from other parts of the world became more and more common, mainly out of curiosity about the different cultures that existed in that place. Of course, harmful and aggressive cultures of players who wanted to impose how other people should act were cut down instantly after a simple report from other players and a review by the Oasis moderation team, which led to the bigots being banned for 24 hours the first time, then 7 days the second time, 30 days the third time, 3 months the third time, and so on. Oasis did not prevent players from preaching their beliefs, as long as it didn't negatively affect other players' experience. The option most used by players, which made the world of Oasis even more perfect in their view, is that it was possible to block a person with a simple touch of a button, making it so that the two people could no longer see or hear each other inside the game, something that was impossible to do in real life. Because of this, people with insecurities were much less afraid of interacting with other people in Oasis, as in any uncomfortable situation they could just block the other player and continue on with their lives peacefully. In the bar where Thor and the warriors of Asgard were drinking, Thor looked at the television that was showing a game of Fortnite and sighed in disappointment. The game was not what he imagined, although it was fun to compete with other people to see who would be the best among the 100 people in that game. Because they mostly used firearms, it made the battle much less fun than it actually was. Even Minecraft was more fun than Fortnite for the Asgardians, as the way combat worked in Minecraft was more in the style they liked, despite the aesthetics of the game not being as appealing to them. Hey, did you hear about the Easter egg that some players found in the most isolated neighborhood of this hub? A muscular black man with long dreadlocked hair said to his friend beside him. Easter egg, what was it? An Asian-looking man asked with interest. It seems that a group of drunk players went walking through the city and got lost while trying to find their house. Due to alcohol, one of the players fell to the ground, but to the player's surprise, he had landed with his mouth on top of a book. The man explained. A book? In this hub? Are you sure? Ha ha. His friend laughed out loud. The hub they were in was a more medieval-looking hub, so to match the hub, the stores here were more medieval-themed, so it was very rare for books to appear, as players here preferred to fight with the fists than with words. Yes, because the player was drunk, he didn't even feel the pain of the fall and picked up the book from the ground. That book was telling the story of a medieval world, where there were different races, there were kingdoms, people fought against monsters, there were trolls of ice, even dragons. The man had a loud and lively voice, which attracted the attention of the other players in the tavern-like bar. Hey, this world looks interesting. But how do you know this is an Easter egg and not just a book made by another player? Another player asked curiously. The black man laughed and explained. Because the signature at the end of the book was a very unique name. Notch. Hearing that the signature at the end of the book was Notch's made players even more sober, wanting to know more about this book. Notch. Geez, it's impossible to forge a signature here at Oasis, so if this was signed by Notch, then it must mean that it was done by Notch. The Asian player got excited. Yes. Is this an Easter egg from an upcoming game? Another player asked excitedly. What is an Easter egg? Volstagg asked confused. Seeing Volstagg's appearance, which looked a bit like a red-haired medieval dwarf, players were a bit taken aback, but soon understood that maybe he wasn't someone very tech-savvy. Easter egg is what players say when a game developer puts a hidden message inside the game. Sometimes it's like a teaser for an upcoming game. One of the players in the tavern explained. Hey, what's the name of that book? Thor asked interested. The black man smiled and replied mysteriously, trying to create suspense. The Elder Scrolls Warcraft. Nunu note. Please, read my other novel, Game Developer System. Alex was looking at the nearly finished game quite proudly. Initially he was very doubtful about which RPG he was going to do. In his mind, there were 3 games with great potential to make that were guaranteed to be enjoyed by most players. Those games were Skyrim, which despite being single-player, had a very vast, extensive and immersive world, with a wide variety of ways to play and a lot of magic and battle skills to develop, something that Alex loved very much, since being able to play as a knight who summoned swords of magic, but who also knew how to make potions, enchantment, forge, and several other things at the same time was incredible. Another game was World of Warcraft, which despite being a game that had existed for almost 20 years in Alex's previous world, was still a game that managed to remain very current, especially with the idea of two factions that are enemies and can kill each other at any time. But it has a great and deep story, and it was completely designed to support millions of players playing simultaneously and interacting with each other, but it was very limited on the powers, which forced the player to create multiple characters if he wanted to try everything that the game had to offer. And the last game was Dark Souls, which after some consideration, Alex understood that this game was the most limited of the three, that despite being quite fun and challenging, the biggest focus and point of enjoyment that Alex felt from the game was in the fights against the bosses, which were a lot of fun, but for a multiplayer issue as he planned it, made everything a little more complicated than he imagined. So Alex's idea was that he would first focus on making an MMORPG and then release Dark Souls as a single-player game like his previous world, with the option to invite friends to help play in the form of souls, as he felt that this system was a lot of fun and was sure to be a hit. For the actual game, Alex was quite confused between Skyrim or World of Warcraft. On the one hand, it was a game with total freedom for the player, with mechanics so incredible that it would be a waste to waste. But that had a limited history and that would not support millions of players simultaneously in the same world. On the other hand, there was WoW, which it had an incredible world, with an extremely fun story, very challenging dungeons and raids that induced players to form groups, guilds and social interaction itself, but that sinned in the freedom that the player had, limiting players to so many things that it became a bit boring for a more casual player who didn't want to have multiple characters. So, after much consideration, Alex finally decided to just merge the two games together. He intended to use the history and world of Azeroth in WoW, with the two factions, being the Alliance and the Horde, but with some changes in the classes, where the players would still have to choose some specific classes, but that these players would not be as limited as they progressed, being able to make several changes to their classes through deeper specs and more freedom with player creations in professions, just like Skyrim. If there is a player who wants to make a stealth mage who uses magic for assassinations, he can. If a player wants to use the holy power of a priest to make any player very tanky, he can. Alex decided to increase the limits of each class, but of course, with great balance. With these ideas he had, if he wanted this to be implemented without any balancing, probably in a few days someone would be able to make a class that could kill a max level character in less than a second. So Alex spent another million GP to buy the best artificial intelligence to be the GM of Azeroth. This artificial intelligence was not only responsible for 99% of the game's balance, but it would also be responsible for helping players with any problems they had through a ticket, and for monitoring players doing boosting or selling gold, since for more that Alex felt it would be interesting to let players earn money by selling gold in the game. This would make the experience for players who could not afford to buy it very bad. So, Alex commanded GM Intelligence to prohibit any kind of sale of gold for anything other than something in-game, still looking to see if the transaction price is fair or if players are pretending to be trading but actually are selling gold, and warning these players not to do this with a warning. If the player does it again, the player will be banned from WoW and Oasis for 3 days, and so the time will increase just like Oasis. That way Alex intends to prevent this kind of thing from happening. But he won't be like Blizzard in his previous world, which prohibited players from buying gold, but also sold WoW token that could be bought with real money and sold for gold in-game. Alex didn't want any real money to interfere with Warcraft's economy. Alex intended to make Warcraft a game with a monthly fee, just like World of Warcraft was in his previous world, with a relative price for each country. First world countries would have a monthly fee of $15 just like the United States in his previous world, emerging countries would have a monthly fee of $10 and poor countries would have a monthly fee of $5. This was the pricing split Blizzard used in Alex's previous world, which he felt was fairly fair, and he intended to adopt that in this world as well, so the game would average $10 per month for each subscriber. If players wanted to spend more money on the game, which Alex knows they would, he had developed a shop for cosmetic items, such as cute gear for players to use as transmogs, a skin for their armor, and other really nice mounts. Of course, these things could also be obtained within the game, but through a very difficult process, so any player would have the opportunity to have whatever he wanted, having money or not. The story that Alex decided to follow would be the same as WoW Classic, starting with only 4 races for each faction, where in the future new races would arrive. But of course, as this game was in virtual reality, as well as the novels that Alex had read in his previous world, he felt that making a more immersive system was also fundamental. So like the NPCs in Oasis, each NPC in Elder Scrolls Warcraft would have their own artificial intelligence, making it seem like they were real people. The game world was also being expanded, so the size of the world would be much more realistic, with the cities also being larger than in the game for more immersion. For the new buildings, Alex decided that players could buy their houses in the large cities or small towns that were expanded, an idea he got from Final Fantasy XIV, which he had played in the previous world. When he played this Final Fantasy, Alex got tired of playing the game one day, but for fear of losing his house for being inactive for 45 days, Alex still paid 3 more months of monthly fee even without playing, just because he liked the game so much. House he had decorated. So the house system was also something that Alex integrated into the world. While increasing the size of the game is an issue if players get bored, Alex has also added 2 systems for players to use to speed up that time. Players could hire a chariot to go from one city to another every 10 minutes for a low amount of copper and get off halfway, or they could pay a few silver coins to hire a hippogriff to fly from one city to another. If the distance was greater, the price would also be greater, just like in WoW. Another thing Alex did was an optimization of the graphics in his game memory. While Skyrim with several mods and WoW in the last expansions had a very beautiful graphic, Skyrim Vanilla and WoW Classic were terribly ugly. So Alex decided to use realistic graphics as the basis for this game, much like the WoW movie that had been released in his previous world. As for the world, Alex used system to enhance that as much as possible while focusing on developing quests, raids, dungeons, NPCs, and the more important stuff. This was the biggest reason why Elder Scrolls Warcraft was the game that Alex spent the most time developing, thus taking over 2 months and still being in the production process. But when this game was ready, Alex was sure the reaction from the players would be priceless. Nunu note: 7 more chapters released on Patreon in the last week. I'm back. Although a lot of development time had passed since Alex started, the game was still being finished. But because Mojang had not released any new games for so long, Alex decided to release some hints of the next game around Minecraft, Fortnite, and mainly, Oasis. Every now and then some lucky players would find some strange items around the hubs, like books, posters, maps, clues that at first didn't make any sense, but when more and more clues like these surfaced on the forums through player reports, it started to make sense. Some players with more free time started to put the pieces together and realized that all these items were representing the same thing, but with different points of view. Something that the players still didn't know what it was, but with each new clue that came up, they got closer to the truth. Hi everyone, I'm the Reader. I recently started noticing some posts on the Oasis forum and it caught my attention. Initially I thought it was just a bunch of people who were lucky to get some free items. But as time went on I realized it wasn't that simple when I bought a book called The Elder Scrolls Warcraft for $10 from a player. For most, this book may seem unknown, but if any of you have seen any posts about these items that other players found, maybe you already know something about this book, you just haven't discovered it yet. This book is telling a very interesting story, a story about an unknown world, where powerful titans are the most powerful beings in the world. But suddenly, one of these titans discovered that there were evil monsters that were corrupting newborn titans and turning those titans into monsters just like them. So Sargeras, the titan who discovered all this, took killing these monsters as his mission. But Sargeras started killing the newly born titans in order to prevent other monsters from being born as well, so the titans got angry with Sargeras and started hunting him too. After countless years of war, Sargeras conquered many worlds and was coming to conquer a world where monsters were dominating. That world was called Azeroth. There, the monsters had enslaved and cursed many races, and not to extend too much in this forum post, after several wars, the Titans imprisoned the monsters of this world before Sargeras arrived. When he arrived he killed these Titans, but it was repelled by a human magician, who was cursed by him, and he dominated the body of her son, who would become the most powerful magician of humanity. I don't even know how to describe it to you. There's still a lot of history ahead, but this history is fascinating. All the posters, maps, pins, everything that I saw other players posting, fits with several parts of this story in this book. That is, everything that players are finding is something related to this book. Elder Scrolls Warcraft. Shocking, no. Now, if my conspiracy theory is correct, the likelihood that whatever we're finding is something related to an upcoming game that Mojang is developing is extremely high. Unlike Fortnite, which seemingly has no backstory, and Minecraft, which only has a storyline of Notch and Herobrine's battle, this new game seems to have enough history for years of exploration. As a gaming fan, and especially a fan of Mojang games, I'm extremely excited to try out this way of playing. Who knows? Perhaps we will be transported to this world and experience war against this titan called Sargeras. I haven't finished reading the book yet, but I found out that there is an option to copy this to the console, so I decided to post the complete book. If anyone is interested in reading the book with me to have discussions about it, I would love to. Elder_Scrolls_Warcraft, TXT. After reading this user's forum post, Mojang's billions of fans were soon shocked and excited by this story of a possible game from the company. When they started reading the books and saw that some of the posters the players had in their hands were related to this story, some rich people were offering thousands of dollars for it, which made the people who found these Easter eggs very happy. Initially this post wasn't very successful, but with more and more people spreading the word about a new game Mojang was developing, it spread extremely quickly. Among the people who downloaded the book file was Hogan, who, for having asked for a drinking competition, was forced to read the book aloud so that the warriors of Asgard would understand this story without having to read any words. These titans look quite powerful, they can destroy planets. Fandral commented after a sigh. I think my dad can do that too. Thor responded a little angrily, but inside he was unsure if he would ever get such magnificent power. Considering he would be the next king of Asgard, the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, for the first time Thor wondered if he would be worthy, since if beings as powerful as the Titans came along, would he be able to defend his kingdom? When he heard the story about the human mage who defeated the mighty Titan, Thor was reminded of the human mage who welcomed them to Midgard, the Ancient One, who, in his father's words, wasn't even weaker than he was. On the other side of the Oasis, inside a large building called the Ancient School of Magic, a name she didn't like, and where hundreds of students came and went every hour, the Ancient One, which Thor was afraid of, was reading the book called Elder Scrolls Warcraft. After she downloaded the book, she was able to turn it into a physical book after paying 10 cents, which was much more comfortable for her than reading on the system window, as she had been reading physical books for centuries. When she read the stories about the Titans and how humans had created a school of magic that trained mages to protect the world, she felt quite familiar with it. Perhaps Notch already knows about Kamar Taj, she thought. In her mind, it was too much of a coincidence that the humans in this story had created a school of magic where they trained humans to deal with forces so powerful they could destroy the world, while avoiding earthly conflicts without supporting either side. Reading about how powerful the Titans in that book are, and how powerful the enemies she's had to deal with to protect Earth countless times, the Ancient One almost felt like she was reading a book about another perspective of what she had experienced. Fortunately in this book the humans are victorious, but when she saw about orcs coming from another dimension to try to conquer the human world, her heart sank again, uncertain about how this war would turn out. As the game for that book hadn't been released yet, she didn't even have a spoiler about what might happen in the future, so, as a young 15-year-old teenager, the Ancient One got up from her chair and lay down on the bed beside her. with her belly down and her legs up, while reading this fascinating story that managed to intrigue her. Not only were they interested in this story, most of the other players also found it very interesting. If it was just a regular book, probably 80% of these people wouldn't be interested at all, but since this book told the story of a possible Mojang game, almost all players became interested in it and started reading. Those who didn't like to read were listening to audiobooks on the internet, or even going to bars where there were people reading the story on stage. During his bed breaks, where he stopped to drink water and rest, people in the bars began to discuss what had happened in the story, creating theories, criticizing some characters, or even declaring that they liked some other characters. Without these players realizing it, when the story of the humans of the Alliance was told, many people felt that they were the heroes, and when the story of the Horde was told, many people understood that even though they had low IQ, what they were doing it was what they had to do to protect their family, which earned the Horde supporters as well. Before long, the community began to split into groups debating who was right and who was wrong. Alliance and Horde representatives would meet and discuss each other's strengths and weaknesses, trying to convince as many people as possible to join them. Seeing people walking around in blue shirts with a golden lion or red shirts with a black primitive symbol, Steve Rogers was shocked. I thought that in this peaceful time there would be no more wars since everyone's life is good, but now I'm faced with a virtual war starting. Steve was shocked as he looked at these people and started studying about it, trying to understand who was right. Elsewhere, Tony Stark also had a book in his hand as he looked at the group of people in blue and red shirts, unsure who was right or wrong in this story. Players were shocked at how incredible this story was developing. When they saw that orcs had invaded the continent of humans and were successfully conquering lands, there were players who were very happy and proud about it, while other players were furious that these orcs were conquering human space, so more and more discussions from players with this subject came up non-stop. Until suddenly, after a few days, with the hype of Elder Scrolls Warcraft growing, Mojang finally made a change. Peter and Hulk were walking around Oasis while visiting some stores around. They discovered that the Hulk was very fond of eating meat, and in a certain hub there was the best steakhouse they had ever tried. So today, after a few hours of playing Skyblock on the Hypixel, Peter and Hulk said goodbye to Ned, who was busy editing some videos from his livestream, and went to eat at Oasis. Just like in Hypixel, Hulk in Oasis still had the appearance with skin color to see, but after a few months of practice living in that world, Hulk learned to wear clothes, as he played a lot with Ned, and Ned was already earning a lot of money on his live streams. Ned regularly deposited money into the Hulk's account so that he could spend it on whatever he wanted, as in their view, Hulk apparently didn't have an easy time in the real world. So whenever Hulk saw an outfit he thought was cool, he would buy it and equip it on the spot, often forgetting about the other clothes he had and just wearing the same outfit for weeks until he found some other one he thought was cool. As a small child, Hulk's attention was easily distracted, while his memory wasn't very good for small things, so he didn't even remember the other clothes he had. Recently he saw some other players walking around Oasis with green skins like his and wearing red shirts, which attracted his attention and made him feel very happy. Passing by a store that sold red shirts like that, he asked Peter if he could buy a shirt too, to look like those other green-skinned players like him, which Peter left without a second thought, seeing how his little big friend was happy about that. At that time Peter was wearing a red shirt with a spider's design on it which he thought was really cool, and Hulk was wearing a red shirt with the Horde symbol which he didn't know the meaning of but felt was really cool. But he froze when he looked inside a store that had a lot of players. Peter was a little surprised by Hulk's reaction and looked at the store his friend was looking at and was also surprised. That store was one of the Mojang stores inside Oasis. Each hub had one such store, which had space to fit hundreds of people at the same time, but surprisingly, even with hundreds of people, the place was quite full, which made Peter curious as to why. Looking at the store, the place was completely decorated with red flags with the same symbol as the Hulk's shirt and blue flags with a golden lion, which was apparently the symbol of the Alliance, the rival group to the Horde. "Hey Hulk, wanna go to the store and see what's going on?" Peter asked excitedly. Hulk wants. Hulk, who had finally woken up, responded enthusiastically as he ran into the store with Peter. Look at that, another orc with skin to see, get out of here. A player in an Alliance shirt shouted at Hulk, causing him to startle at this reaction. Even though he's been playing Minecraft and Oasis for months, this was the first time someone had yelled at him because of the color of his skin, which made him really sad in real life, but which for the first time really hurt Hulk here. His anger was rising when he intended to go fight with that person, but someone was faster than him. Shut up, you dog of the kingdom, you think we don't know how dark your nobles are? It's much better to be an orc with green skin, but with bravery and honor than a dog of a king like you. A player with green skin and a red shirt shouted at that first player. Seeing this happen, Hulk's anger instantly subsided, leaving him shocked by this reaction. Even though he was never criticized because of his skin color in this virtual world, he had never seen anyone defend him in a fight other than his friends, especially when he saw that player's skin color. Hulk was even more moved. Come brother, fear not, Thrall will guide us to glory. The player with the green skin yelled at Hulk with a big smile as he held out his arms. As soon as that player did that, other players with green skin and horde shirts appeared while smiling at Hulk and Peter, inviting them to join their group. Hulk was confused and didn't know what to do. Whenever that happened, he looked to Peter and Ned for help, and this time was no different. Seeing how the players in the horde jersey were being welcoming to them, Peter smiled at Hulk and walked towards the horde players. His spider red jersey matched the horde jersey of these players much more, and seeing how receptive they were, Peter didn't think twice about joining them. Among the players with the horde shirt, there were not only players with green skins, but there were also players with bullhorn hats, players with zombie makeup, and even players with blue skins, which looked much more fun than the other side. Seeing Peter go, Hulk lost his fear and also went to those players. This was a unique experience for him. When he arrived at this group of people, everyone gave him a big hug and offered him a very nice drink that was served in a very big horn-like cup, and a big piece of roast meat that was held by a big bone. Hulk, who was holding the big piece of meat with one hand while drinking that drink with the other hand, was surprised at how much fun it was and was quite satisfied. Peter was also eating at the time, but he was talking to the player who called them into this group. Friend, what's going on here? Where did this food come from? He asked. The player who called them replied with a proud smile. We were walking down this street when we found out that Mojang was holding a surprise event about Elder Scrolls Warcraft. The store was divided into two sections, the Alliance place, he said as he pointed to the other side of the store, where there were the players in the blue shirts who were also laughing and having fun. And the Horde side, he said as he opened his hand to the side where they were. Apparently Mojang is going to make a surprise announcement in a few minutes. The NPCs haven't given any details on what that would be, but with the store decor it's kind of clear that maybe it's related to the next game, haha. The player chuckled before taking a big gulp of his drink. Peter started looking around and saw that this indeed seemed to be the case. Even the Mojang NPCs were wearing Alliance and Horde shirts while adding more food for players to eat for free. Thinking of Ned, who was editing the live streams and didn't know it, Peter soon called his friend and explained what was going on for him to come, as this would probably bring a lot of viewers to Ned's live. When Ned heard this, he quickly stopped editing it and ran to Peter's hub wanting to join in as well while explaining to the livestream viewers what was going on. Seeing that Ned was rushing to a surprise Mojang event, more and more players told their friends, and while other players also connected to Oasis to participate in person, people who were busy in real life started watching the livestream of Ned and other streamers who discovered this to see what would happen. Within minutes all of Mojang's stores across all of the game's hubs were filled to capacity with nearly 1,000 players, making the place very crowded. Fortunately this was a virtual world, so even though the place was crowded, the temperature of the place was still very refreshing, not letting anyone get hot and uncomfortable. Food continued to be served for another 20 minutes until suddenly the lighting changed. The room's brightness dimmed by 90%, leaving it bright enough for the players to barely make out the outline of whoever was next to them, and a screen appeared in the center of the shop. On the screen, there were only 4 words: The Elder Scrolls, Warcraft. Currently, Twitch was the company that dominated the list with the highest number of users to watch videos and livestreams online. In the latest market analysis, in the livestream market, Twitch accounted for 96% of the amount of hours watched on livestreams around the world, and in terms of videos, that number currently stands at 73%. Considering that Twitch had accepted users to post their videos there just 2 months ago, swallowing 73% of the market was already something completely unbelievable. Already considering the livestreams, it was not surprising that this number was 96%, since 99.5% of Mojang Games livestreams were held on Twitch, and seeing that Mojang Games were completely dominating this industry, this did not surprise anyone. So to see that streamers on Oasis were already amassing over 500 million people currently watching after the news that Mojang was holding a surprise event was very acceptable to viewers around the world. At this point, no one was thinking how staggering these numbers were, but were actually looking to see if their favorite streamer was online at one of Mojang's stores in Oasis to see if they would be able to watch this event. On Ned's livestream, there were currently 92 million people around the world. As the language barrier had no difference in Mojang game livestreams because of simultaneous translation, people from different countries were excitedly commenting while speculating what was going to happen. But they didn't have to wait long. The lights in all Mojang stores dimmed by 90% so that players could focus on the large screen that appeared floating in the center of the store, right on the boundary between players on the Alliance side and players on the Horde side. On that screen, a map with 2 continents divided by a stormy sea appeared. "Look, this is the map," someone posted on the forum. One player yelled excitedly. Suddenly, a very graceful and experienced female voice appeared in the video, saying something that made the players shiver. Reference video: World of Warcraft, cinematic trailer. Hyperlink for Patreons, web links. 4 years have passed since the mortal races came together and stood united against the might of the Burning Legion. Whoa, the book was right. Another player yelled excitedly. I knew that post was right, that book really stood for something important. Although Azeroth was saved, the tenuous pact between the Horde and the Alliance all but evaporated. The drums and thunder of war once more. For the Horde. For the Alliance. Players on both sides started screaming excitedly as they heard the narrator's voice saying the name of the group they liked. When they heard the scream from the other end, players would start screaming even louder, trying to compete over who had the most excited crowd in the store. Suddenly, the narrator became quiet and the map image disappeared from the screen, making the players grow quiet in anticipation. In the background it was possible to hear a song being sung by a male choir. This choir was saying words that no one there could understand, but by the drums playing in the background it sounded like something grand. Snow appeared on the screen, and right after that a dwarf with a shotgun in his hand walking with a bear appeared. From behind the mountain they were walking on, a grandiose city that entered the mountain appeared, causing Alliance group players to scream. The dwarves are part of the Alliance. It's an Alliance dwarf. For the Alliance. The Horde players saw this and got excited, waiting for someone from the Horde to show up next for them to scream too. Snowflakes covered the vision of the dwarf walking across the mountain and changed to leaves that revealed the figure of a graceful woman with purple skin and pointed ears. This woman was crouched down while looking at something dead on the ground while leaning on a staff. Hearing some noise, the woman started running through the forest, and the faster she ran, the more the players screamed, until suddenly, when the woman stood in front of a cliff, instead of stopping her running, a purple glow reflected on the moon and she turned into a big black panther. This black panther fearlessly jumped off the cliff, leaving the camera behind. It's a night elf. Night elves are beautiful. She's from the Alliance. For the Alliance. The Alliance players started jumping up and down excitedly as they screamed and cheered to see a character so beautiful that they had only heard about in the stories in the book. Now there, so beautiful and realistic in front of them on that big screen in the middle of the store. The Horde players felt their blood run hot with excitement. They also wanted to scream just like the Alliance players, but no Horde race showed up. But to their happiness, as soon as the beautiful night elf disappeared, a very ugly foot appeared with the sounds of crows flying and screaming all around. As soon as the camera lifted, an old man with necrotic skin appeared. If it was just the appearance of this old man, people would even feel disgust and revulsion, but seeing the green fire behind this man, and mainly, the great stone demon and green lava rising up, most of the men in the room were shocked. How badass this old man looked. Whoa, that's an undead. It's an undead. For the Horde. As soon as the first Horde race emerged, the Horde players were finally able to release the emotion they had been repressing, and they screamed from the bottom of their hearts. The undead weren't even such a popular-looking race among readers who liked the Horde, but the history of this race was something that people really enjoyed, and seeing the first race of the Horde come into being, these players screamed anyway. With the scream of the great demon behind the undead, the screen changed to a beautiful pasture, and in front of the camera, a giant minotaur appeared, with extremely large muscles, but with great grace this giant scattered a glowing dust among the plants that were growing. It's a tauren. OMG, the tauren is behemoth. For the Horde. But the Horde players didn't even have time to breathe, when the golden dust that the tauren released changed the image into red flames. These flames started showing a large destroyed castle, probably the result of a recent invasion. And right after that, an extremely muscular monster appeared, with very toned muscles and green skin. This monster was hitting a wooden stick on the ground until it attacked the camera before letting out a powerful roar. Orc. The orc has appeared. Whoa-ah-ah-h-h-h. For the Horde, for the Horde. When that orc was engulfed in flames, the song reached a climax. The camera view changed to a tower. In this tower several fireballs were being thrown around. As it got closer, it could be seen that the target of the fireballs was the lava giant that the undead was controlling, and at the top of the tower, the one throwing those fireballs was a human. Before the players could fully realize how that human was doing it, the human turned to the camera and threw that fireball at it. The human magician. The magician is relentless. For the ALIANCE, for the Alliance. When the fireball hit the camera, the screen went black for 2 seconds, making players anticipate what would come next. Soon the vision returned to color, and the dwarf who was walking in the forest earlier, was now pointing his shotgun forward before shooting. The bear who was walking beside the dwarf was now running while roaring towards an enemy. And the enemy of these two. It was a mighty tauren that hit the bear with great force using a gigantic wooden log. For the ALIANCE, for the Alliance. For the Horde, for the Horde. The scene showed several lava giants running in some direction, before switching to a scene of a powerful orc attacking an agile night elf. For the ALIANCE, for the Alliance. For the Horde, for the Horde. A human mage was controlling the power of ice to freeze the ground, until suddenly, the gigantic tauren slammed his wooden log into the camera, changing the screen to an all too familiar text. The Elder Scrolls Warcraft. Whoa-ah-ah-ah-h-h-h-h-h. The Elder Scrolls Warcraft. Players went wild when they saw the end of the trailer. Everything they saw was so magical. For humans who have always fantasized about swords and magic, seeing this world in the trailer in such high visual quality was surprising. If this was just a movie trailer, these players would be pretty excited already, even pre-ordering tickets to watch in the cinema as soon as this was released, but this wasn't a movie, it was something much better. This was a world they could enter and experience it all. A place where they could travel and live as if it were their reality. People who grew up playing tabletop role-playing games or reading fantasy books felt lucky to live in this era, where they could finally fulfill their childhood dream. Among the excited players, there was one whose heart was so racing with excitement that he even wanted to crush something. Hulk. Initially he didn't understand why the other players were so excited about this video. He was just feeling that it was fun to be with these other people with colorful skins who treated him so well. But when a muscular orc with green skin appeared swinging a staff of wood, Hulk was shocked. Is he like the Hulk? Hulk thought in disbelief. Seeing the scene of that green-skinned man fighting that purple-skinned woman caused mixed feelings in Hulk's little heart. For him, who had never seen another person like him, even though Ned, Peter and other players treated him well, It was still a bit lonely, but seeing that orc on the screen made Hulk feel great familiarity with the scene. Haha, did you see how cool that orc was? That's why I changed my skin color to green. When I read in the story in the book about what orcs were like, I knew I had to be an orc. Even I don't want to be a warrior like him, being a shaman sounds really cool. The player who had invited Peter and Hulk into their group laughed as he hugged Hulk, who was still confused. You too, right friend? When I saw your green skin, I knew that we would be brothers of the same race, we would both be mighty orcs. The player remained excited. Hulk looked at this player who also had green skin and smiled. Hulk is also an orc. From what the man said, even though Hulk wasn't very smart, he understood that that green man on the screen was called an orc, and without quite understanding it, in Hulk's mind the only possibility for his situation is that he was also an orc. Orc. After so many years in Bruce's body not knowing what he really was, for the first time in his life, Hulk understood that he was something called an orc, and he felt really good about it. In an internet livestream, Bruce Banner had also just watched the trailer for the Elder Scrolls Warcraft. Seeing that orc swinging that staff, he immediately remembered Hulk. Maybe Hulk is an orc. Or was orc based on Hulk? Bruce wondered confused. Since he first played Minecraft a few months ago, he has never had a problem with anger again. Hulk never bothered him wanting to hang out again, and watching the livestream of Ned and Peter with Hulk, Bruce always felt there was something in him that was missing. As much as he always hated the Hulk and wanted to get rid of him, now that the Hulk really disappeared and managed to find friends who liked him was something that Bruce felt he should like, but for some reason, it made him a little sad. Looking at the Oasis forum, he saw that there was a new section, whereas before there was only the Minecraft and Fortnite sub-forums. After the trailer ended an Elder Scrolls Warcraft sub-forum appeared. Entering there, Bruce saw that there were already hundreds of posts, and the number was only increasing. With so many new posts popping up, Bruce found a post that detailed a research and analysis of the orcs' story from the book. There he began to read about orcs and how they operated, and as much of a scholar as he was, Bruce felt that it seemed a little interesting the way orcs operated, the rituals they had, the way orcs gained the respect of the tribe. Until an idea popped into his mind. I think I'm going to be an orc in Elder Scrolls Warcraft. Obviously Bruce and Hulk weren't the only ones shocked by this trailer. Gamers all over the world were frantically discussing what they saw in the trailer, and creating theories of how this world could work. Studies about the races and the possible classes that would be available, even thinking about more absurd theories like if it would be possible to tame animals like the dwarf had done with the bear, and if it was possible, would the players be able to ride the bear and use the animal like a mount? With this theory emerging, groups of players focused on analyzing the history of the world and the possible monsters that could be used as mounts emerged. Even a small detail about a tribe of a Murloc race did not go unnoticed by the discerning eye of players, making them speculate that Murlocs were a secret race that could be enabled in the game, as this did not appear in the trailer. Alex, currently with Anna, who had called him to a Mojang store when she heard about the event, was curiously watching the players' enthusiasm. What made him laugh was that even among the X-Men there were some arguments about whether they should join the Horde or the Alliance. On the one hand there were the girls who wanted to create characters in the Alliance, as they thought it would be awesome to be beautiful night elves. On the other hand, there were the boys who felt that Tauren were too manly and wanted to be great warriors like them. Alex, what do you think? The Alliance is much better, right? Anna asked Alex, who was logged into account A with a serious expression. Alex was helpless. If he was going to be honest, he leaned more towards the Horde than the Alliance, since in his previous world, the character he played the most was an orc hunter, but considering that Anna wanted to play as an Alliance, he had no problem doing so, a night elf hunter in this world. I think you would look beautiful as a night elf rogue, Alex said in a flirty voice as he squeezed her waist. Knowing that Anna's X-Men codename was Rogue, Alex thought this class would be a great fit for her. Seeing the way Alex responded, Kurt booed without a second thought. Boo, Alex is just saying that because he thinks the night elf is pretty and he wants to see Anna in a short outfit like that night elf in the video. Hearing Kurt's comment, the other X-Men laughed and Anna blushed a little as she slapped Alex on the shoulder, but didn't remove his hand from her waist. In those 2 months, Alex and Anna's relationship progressed a lot, from a little casual flirting to the point where they were already dating. In times when Alex wasn't developing Elder Scrolls Warcraft or taking care of the other games, he spent his free time having fun with Anna or B, so it would be hard not to start dating, with the mutual feeling they had. With the other X-Men, when Kurt and Scott found out that B and Alex were friends in reality, the friendship of the four got even closer, as they raced a lot with cars both in Oasis and in real life. When Scott heard Kurt comment on the night elf's short clothes, he immediately thought of something. "And you, Jean, what is your favorite race?" Hearing Scott's question, Jean became a little shy and answered in a low voice. "I found the history of the trolls a bit interesting." Despite the fact that the Mojang store they were in was quite noisy, when Jean said that she liked the race of trolls, everyone in the group heard it. But it was as if they hadn't heard well. On everyone's face there was the same expression as they asked. "Trolls." After talking with the X-Men group for a few more minutes, Alex said goodbye to them and logged out of Oasis. As Anna had really liked the Night Elves, Alex promised that he would also make a Night Elf with her so that they could level up together. Different from his previous world where there were several WoW servers, where in each server 90% of the population was only from a single faction, making that in some servers 90% of the players were from the Horde, or in other servers 90% of the players were from the Alliance. In Elder Scrolls Warcraft, Alex did not intend to do this. To balance this problem, he decided that the game would only have a single server, and that the difference in population between the two factions could be a maximum of 10%. Thus, when a faction reached 60% of the players in the game, that faction would be temporarily unavailable for players to create an account there, only allowing the player to create a character in the other faction until that balance was balanced again. He knew this could be a little off-putting for players who really wanted to create a character to play with friends in a faction, but found that faction was temporarily unavailable. So, to make everything more organically balanced, Alex used a system of collecting player data in Oasis to understand which faction they had the most affinity for, and was surprised to find that among players interested in Elder Scrolls Warcraft, 55% of players had more interest in the Horde and 45% were more interested in the Alliance, so initially he didn't even need to limit players to a faction. But fearing that players would suddenly change their minds at some point, Alex developed some faction-focused advertisements to trick players into the faction with the fewest players at the moment. Thus, when a faction had 56% or more of the players after the game's launch, these advertisements for the opposing faction appeared in Oasis, inducing new players to join that faction. Of course, this would all be done very discreetly and subliminally, so that players wouldn't realize that Mojang was trying to trick them into choosing one of the factions, otherwise players from the other faction might think there was favoritism towards the game developer. Looking at the player interest data, Alex was quite satisfied. Of the more than 3 billion Oasis users, at least 1 billion have already shown a great deal of interest in the new game, while another 1 billion were mildly curious and the remaining 1 billion were not as interested but were still a little curious to see how the game would be before defining an opinion. Only a small portion of the remaining players felt that they didn't like the game at all and had no interest at all, but that was normal, as it would be impossible to please all players, especially seeing people of all ages, of all ethnicities and with completely different lifestyles. It would be hard to believe that an 80-year-old woman from India who had downloaded Oasis to meet her distant relatives would show interest in a game of something so out of her depth. But looking at the interest of that country's population, Alex found this a little surprising, as older people there had a high rate of research about the game after the trailer was released, especially about the Tauren race, which considering the culture of that place, Alex felt it was somewhat understandable. Even if young Indians were not as interested in their parents' culture and religion, older people still had customs and precepts that attracted them to a race like the Tauren. Curious, Alex looked at survey data from players in other countries and saw very different patterns from different places. Russians showed a lot of interest in dwarves, while Japanese and Koreans were very interested in gnomes. North Americans did not surprise Alex with an interest in humans and orcs, while South Americans were very enthusiastic about night elves. Eastern Europe was interested in trolls while the West was interested in undeads, with Africa and China leaning towards trolls. Different regions had different interests, which Alex found quite interesting, as this was data he didn't have access to in his previous life. Of course, the difference in this statistic wasn't that big, just the interest of each region's preferred races being 2 or 3% higher than that of the second-ranking race. In total, the races that players were most interested in were human and night elf for the Alliance and orcs and taurens for the Horde. Alex knew that if blood elves were available to the Horde, that race would likely rise to the top or second spot on the roster for that faction, as the appeal to that race in his previous world was second only to humans in the game. Initially for Elder Scrolls Warcraft races, Alex intended to release only the 8 starter races of WoW Classic and then release other races for players to be able to use in the traditional way, but when he saw some comments, another idea came to Alex. Maybe I can make some secret races, just like the Murlocs that became an April Fool's joke in my previous world. Maybe I can use the system that WoW implemented in Legion so that players can meet other races in the game and unlock that race for them in an unobtrusive way, like an Easter egg that players would have to play and gain reputation with the race before they could become one of them. Alex began to come up with this plan. His idea for Elder Scrolls Warcraft was different from the idea of WoW, where a player needed to create several characters to get the most out of the game. In this world, Alex intended to use a mixture of Skyrim ideas with Final Fantasy XIV, where the player only would need a single character. To change classes, players would only have to change weapons after learning this other class with some instructors around the world. So, after unlocking another class, the player could switch between his classes freely, of course, having to level up the class. Another class again, but still with the same character. That way the player would have much more affinity for his character, since he wouldn't need to have several. But that would have the problem of limiting the player to experience other races, so Alex was thinking of some way to let players switch races and experience the story of the other race the player chose to become, but this without lessening the attachment that the player had for the character and the starting race he chose. Maybe I could put something like a cooldown on it. The player could switch races through some in-game ritual and experience the leveling of that race in the starting zone as memories of that body, but that could only be done X number of times in a game. Certain time limit. Alex kept looking at the list of possible races he would add in the future and trying to plan how he was going to develop it. Since he wanted to decrease the player's desire to create another character as much as possible, he would have to think of a fun and balanced way to bring the stories of the other races to the players. Especially thinking about the new races in the game that would come in the future, it would be unfair not to allow early gamers to not experience that just because they didn't join the game later. Alex's mind was working at high intensity as gamers around the world were buzzing about the game and fueling the hype the trailer provided. In just the 24 hours the trailer was released, it already had over 4 billion views, and that number is only increasing with players watching the trailer multiple times. With the event that Mojang held at company stores across all hubs, other player stores around Oasis also understood that this was a great idea and were also changing the decorations to match Elder Scrolls Warcraft without Mojang asking anything. Bars that only Horde players could enter were becoming quite common, as were places that only Alliance players could enter as well. That way, players met new people much more easily, now because they had something in common, just like football, and the interaction for players was getting more and more fun. Even the most perceptive people noticed from the story in the book that there was something called guilds in that world and soon understood that it could be quite useful. This information from guilds has even reached the government of several countries, and some countries have already started to contact streamers from their country to try to partner to develop a government guild, to attract young people from the country to participate and thus also help with patriotism and the government's interaction with the population. Oasis has already left a clear message for the government and the world's big companies: I am inevitable. So with that in mind, people with ingenious minds already saw the opportunity that this could have and soon started thinking about the best way to make the most of it. With the Elder Scrolls Warcraft trailer, gamers went wild. People around the world were developing strategies for the game based on what they saw in the books. Companies were planning what they would do in the game to get more profit since it was a huge visibility platform, and ordinary gamers were just enjoying themselves, all this and wondering how they could experience the game. After the trailer's release, a large castle with dragon carving details appeared in all hubs. Just like getting into Minecraft, players could do this through the menu anywhere, or they could go to a castle made out of hypixel blocks, or Fortnite players could use a flying bus that picked up players at a certain location. The appearance of this castle with the dragon statues attracted the attention of many curious players. Approaching the castle, some players noticed something that made their blood rush. Just like in Minecraft, the block castle guards were players with square skins like Minecraft. In this dragon castle the guards were divided into 8 different races. There were humans, orcs, dwarves, tauren, gnomes, trolls, night elves and undeads. All wearing armor with the colors that represented their faction color, the Alliance guards in blue and gold, while the Horde guards in red and black. Because of the intimidating aura of these guards, many players gathered around the castle, but they didn't have the courage to come close. Until a player with green skin and a Horde shirt finally plucked up courage and approached the guard who was also an orc. Seeing this player coming, the guard looked at him with a raised eyebrow with a very human expression, and smiled at him. For the Horde, the guard said. On instinct, the player didn't think twice and responded. For the Horde. With that being said, the player became less nervous and asked, "Brother, what is this castle?" Smiling, the orc guard replied, "This castle is the gateway to Azeroth where warriors from that world can teleport to the world of Azeroth to fight alongside us." Hearing this, both the player talking to the guard and the players watching from afar were shocked. "The portal is already active?" the player asked, very excited. The guard just shook his head as he answered, "The portal is still not working. The mages are currently working on the portal so that it will start working in 7 days. In that period of time the only thing you can do in the castle is to experience the creation of the artificial body that you will use in Azeroth." "Will I be able to create my character now?" The player got even more excited while shouting this. When the other players heard this scream from this player, they also got very excited and started to approach, wanting to line up so they could be the first to create their character. You can say it that way. All players can choose the appearance of their artificial body, but the appearance of the character can only be saved by players who decide to pre-order to use the portal. The warrior explained patiently. Hearing this, some players were concerned about the toll it would take. "What is that price?" a player with bull horns and a Horde shirt also asked. "As the price is different for different places, I can't tell you that, but according to my superiors, as long as you open your menu, there will be a pre-order option in a few minutes." The guard answered a little confused, since that part he didn't understand so well. Hearing this, the players quickly opened their menu and started to analyze everything, even finding some changes in the forums that they didn't see, until they found in the store tab, where it was possible to deposit money for Fortnite or buy Minecraft, the option to buy Elder Scrolls Warcraft. Access to the game cost $20 just like Minecraft, but unlike Minecraft, this new world also had a monthly fee, which ranged from $5 to $15 per month depending on where the person lived. Seeing that it was a very reasonable price for the experience they would have in this new world, many players didn't even wait to try character creation and already bought the pre-order version of the game without thinking too much. Especially when they saw that all players who pre-ordered would have access to a limited mount that could never be obtained again. So, in a few minutes Alex saw a huge wave of GP rising on his account, to the point that he got even more excited to touch up the small details that were missing for the finalization of the game. Not only were the players excited for the development of this game, Alex was also very excited about it. Elder Scrolls Warcraft would be a huge source of GP for him, a great opportunity for fun as he intended to play the game, and also a great way to make humanity more powerful in the coming months before the attack on New York. Seeing the players' hype, Alex was very excited. This was the biggest project he had developed so far, and he was sure that this would be the big part of his changing the world. With the increase in the amount of GP he earns, he will be able to start investing in the expansion of time in games, so that in the future, players who spend 5 hours in the game, in fact, have spent 10 hours in the virtual world, something that will surely change the history of mankind. People who would need 4 years to complete a college, will be able to complete it in 2 years in the virtual world, or even less, something that will make humans accelerate even more the advancement of technology. And Alex, the one responsible for this, will be the one who will receive the greatest benefits. After a few more days of developing Elder Scrolls Warcraft, the game was finally 100% complete. Thanks to the system, Alex managed to get rid of all the inconvenient bugs that took away the immersion of the players. As much as there were many bugs that he considered funny, Alex knew that this type of bug took away a lot of immersion from players about the game. Considering the game he was making was literally a new world, any bug that took away players' immersion and reminded them that this was just a game would be a pretty big flaw. Of course, this wasn't a roleplay game, where players were forced to follow roles and pretend they lived there. All players had full rights to talk about NPCs, or use knowledge outside the game to get benefits, such as guides or strategies, more efficient than other players have developed. But he also knew that most players would enjoy just experiencing this world as if they were actually in another reality, so he simply used some GP to fix the game's bugs. The world of Azeroth he made was immense, several times larger than the Azeroth that existed in his previous world. Where a player would have to walk for 30 to 40 hours to cross a part of the map in their previous world on foot, in Elder Scrolls Warcraft the player would need a few hours to do this. Just like in WoW Classic and Skyrim, getting a mount would be a difficult task, especially considering that leveling up in Elder Scrolls Warcraft would be as difficult, if not more difficult than in WoW Classic, where a player with an average of 2 hours of game per day would need months to reach the maximum level. As Elder Scrolls Warcraft players would likely play many more hours a day in this world, Alex had to balance other measures to limit players' leveling speed, as it wouldn't be fun to reach the maximum level so quickly. Unlike WoW where the player had a greater focus on endgame, where he had to reach the maximum level to really enjoy it, Alex used the Elder Scrolls side of it more, where the journey is much more important than the end. Players would have different dungeons to do across levels, with much more enchanting rewards, which would keep players' attention on this low-level content much longer, as well as a higher in-game death penalty, which would make items more powerful, even more necessary, to lower the difficulty for players who could achieve this. With the finalization of the game and the end of the final bug test, Alex knew that the game was 100% complete and that if he logged in now he could even start playing, but Alex didn't. He knew that the best time to play is when the world is swarming with players. People vying for monsters to kill while groups defined tactics to level up, having to attack monsters faster, or taking chances in teams to kill monsters with higher levels, it was all part of the fun. Although the human race and the night elves have a separate starting zone specifically for them, these places are sure to be the most crowded. Alex chuckled as he looked at the players' interest stats on these two races. Players who chose to play gnomes and dwarves would not have as much of a problem because of the low pick rate of these races. The same thing for trolls and undead players, who would have an easier life than players who selected orcs or taurens, but that was what was fun in that game. This facility is sure to attract more players to these races after word spreads, which will contribute to a greater diversity of races in Azeroth. Smiling proudly, Alex prepares to log into Oasis to play some games, but is surprised to see a notification that just arrived in his friends list. Tony, hey Notch, tell me you're in New York. Alex was surprised by this. Maybe Tony wanted to throw a party. Notch, I'm close, why? Tony, great. Please, I'm having a little trouble dealing with a giant monster here and I think your help would be appreciated. I'll send you the location. A giant monster. Maybe Hulk got out of control. But if I'm not mistaken, Hulk played with Ned from time to time. Alex was confused and opened the internet. He didn't even have to search for news sites. The first thing that popped up for him when he Googled New York were several articles on a battle between Iron Man and a giant yellow monster. Looking at the appearance of the giant monster, Alex soon recognized the monster as the Abomination, Hulk's enemy. They battled in New York City, but looking at the news, why was Tony fighting this monster? Opening the list of online players in Oasis, Alex soon found out why. At this time, Hulk was at a bar drinking and dancing with other Horde players while Peter tried to take the drink out of Hulk's hand to prevent him from drinking more. But this attitude only made Hulk more excited and he started breaking things in the bar with great happiness. Seeing Hulk's attitude, the other players saw that this looked like fun and started to break everything inside that bar. The bar owner. It was also breaking everything while drinking with the players. Since this furniture was virtual, the repair of this was extremely low, so the man was not worried at all and drunkenly had fun with others. But seeing Hulk happily drinking like this, Alex soon understood the problem. If Hulk was having fun in Oasis, the only person who could handle Abomination these days was Iron Man. But considering the difference in strength between the two, it was unlikely that Tony could handle that big guy. Even though Abomination's strength was weaker than Hulk's, it was still far greater than what Tony could handle. Notch, alright, I'll be there soon. Knowing that this whole mess was caused because of his interference and that without his help the chance of the Abomination destroying half of New York was too great, Alex knew that he would have to leave to help Tony. Using the mystic powers he previously purchased to visit Twitch, Alex quickly assumed Notch's appearance and prepared to leave. As much as he wanted to drive B away, and B was having a great time driving through the Oasis and Alex didn't want to get in the way, he knew B couldn't get there fast enough, so there was only one alternative. Let's spend some more GP and buy a skill that helps me get around. Alex thought as he looked at the list of skills he could buy with GP. Even though he had spent several million GP in the last few months, the amount of GP he gained was also absurdly large. And considering thousands of GP were being added to his account every second, both from players spending it in Oasis and from players pre-purchasing Elder Scrolls Warcraft, Alex had more than enough to buy the skill he wanted. Among all the movement skills he had access to, the one he most wanted to be the most practical was the jumper skill, a movie he watched many years ago, but which marked his memory with the possibilities that this skill had. Since this skill had obvious weaknesses with electricity, where prepared agents could handle the movie's protagonist with ease, the GP price of this skill wasn't very high, only 600,000 GP. Considering how practical this skill was despite the weakness, the price was too low for Alex, something completely acceptable for him. And of course, not to look weak, Alex also bought a flight skill. Not a skill as powerful as Superman's, as the price for that was tens of millions of GP, but a simple flying skill that is taught at Kamar Taj. Of course, this is a very advanced skill in Kamar Taj that few sorcerers can learn, Future Stranger being one of them, although Stranger prefers to use his cloak to fly, but as Alex had already unlocked mana with some spells he learned from Harry Potter, the price required to learn this flight has been greatly reduced. It would be even cheaper to buy a flying broom from Harry Potter, but Alex found that too ridiculous and was against the idea, preferring to pay more GP and have a cooler and more beautiful flight like Stranger. Okay, I didn't think that my first flight would be for a battle, but who sent me to make such a big mess? Alex thought as he remembered a picture he saw on the internet of the place where the battle was taking place and used the skill jumper to teleport there. Thus, Notch would make his first appearance as a hero. Tony was desperate. Despite being wearing the Mark IV armor, this armor had already been enhanced with some of the concepts of the Mark VI armor that he would later use in the Battle of New York against the alien invasion. But even though this armor was quite technological, it was nowhere near enough to deal with the giant monster that was in front of him. Abomination was far more powerful than Tony's current armor could handle. Luckily this monster's sanity had already been greatly reduced, and since Tony shot some lasers at this monster from time to time, it would still focus on it. The only thing Tony had to do was use Jarvis's aim assist system to help him always aim for the monster's head, which was the place that did the most damage to it. "Where are you, Notch?" Tony yelled in frustration as he looked at his armor's battery rapidly descending. At this rate he would run out of battery in less than 10 minutes, and considering the destruction this monster was causing in the city, maybe the battery wouldn't even last 10 minutes since he had to fly and save other people while shooting the monster. "Sup, Tony?" Suddenly, Tony heard the voice he was most waiting to hear. Looking to the side, he saw Notch, wearing a well-fitting black designer suit with a red scarf draped over his shoulders as he had both hands crossed over his chest. Visual representation on discord.gg/NunuXD. Notch. Tony squealed excitedly when he finally saw the appearance of the man he had been waiting for. Alex didn't know what to wear. He didn't want to wear a stupid superhero outfit like Captain America, but he also didn't think it would be normal to just come in a t-shirt and jeans, so he just bought a bespoke system suit for a few dozen GP with a few functions such as self-repair and self-cleaning. "So, need some help with the big boy?" Notch asked as he floated in the air beside Tony, looking down at the abomination below. Looking at Notch floating in the air, Tony didn't even question how he did it, as he was already getting used to his miracles after seeing so much groundbreaking stuff in Oasis. "Yes, my battery is almost dead," Tony complained. "Okay, back off a bit and change your battery, I'll take over here for a while," Notch said as he approached the abomination floating in the air. While Tony wasn't surprised by how fast Notch got close to him or the fact that Notch was floating in the air like it was nothing, other people weren't so calm. "Look, someone has appeared next to Iron Man," a reporter said excitedly next to the cameraman inside a helicopter of the station where she worked. They were filming this battle a few minutes ago and they were also feeling the desperation of Tony not being able to handle this giant monster. When she saw that someone appeared next to Iron Man, she was the first to comment on it and have the camera point at the mystery man. "This man looks a little familiar," the reporter commented into the microphone as she looked at the man flying in the air. "And he's flying so amazingly, is he using magic? Whoa, look at that man flying, it looks like he's heading towards the abomination." A comment surfaced on the reporter's station live broadcast. "Hey, I also have the same feeling as this reporter, this man looks very familiar. Wait, he's pulling out a wand. Blimey, his wand looks like my wand from Witchcraft. Will he use a Minecraft spell? I am a student at the Oasis School of Magic and I admit that his wand looks very legit. The picture quality is very bad, I can't see who this person is." When the comments were appearing, suddenly the mysterious man pointed his wand at the giant monster and with a quick flick of his wand the monster came out of the ground. OMG. WTF. Did he cast a spell for the monster to float? Is there a spell in Witchcraft that makes monsters float? OMG, I finally recognize this man. Although it is dark, only one person has long hair and can use superpowers in real life like this, it's the Notch. OMG, it's Notch. We are saved, Notch came to stop the monster. In front of the screen of these spectators, Notch raised his wand and made the monster float 30 meters above the ground. The monster's arms and legs were swinging from side to side, but it couldn't grab hold of anything. Suddenly, Notch lowered his wand and as fast as the wand lowered, the monster too began to fall until a very loud crash arose, before a cloud of dust overtook the camera, leaving onlookers confused and excited. What did he do? You did not see. He threw the monster at high speed to the ground. I think with that blow the monster will definitely be knocked unconscious. I don't think so, the monster lasted too long in the battle against Iron Man. Even if Notch is strong, I don't think he will be able to handle this monster. Notch might be powerful inside Oasis, but here in reality he shouldn't be that powerful. Suddenly, several pessimistic comments surfaced, causing viewers to become confused. Everyone was rooting for Notch, but why were these people deliberately discrediting Notch? Shut up if you have nothing nice to say. Just don't cry when Notch kills this monster. Kill that monster. I think Notch is going to be killed by that monster. The fight in the comments was getting more and more intense, until the smoke below. Looking at the place where the monster fell, it was possible to see that something was dragging. People who discredited Notch started to laugh, while those who were rooting for Notch were a little sad. But there was something that confused them. In that crater there was something shining. What is shining in the hole? Does it look like something is on fire? When the smoke finally went down, the spectators could see what was happening. Inside that hole was Abomination squirming hard, trying to destroy everything, but there were thick walls of earth holding him so tight that he didn't have space to get momentum on his arms and legs to break that place. But that alone wasn't enough for him to be so angry. What made Abomination so enraged was that he was being burned in the face by some weird fire that was coming out of that little man's wand. A few meters above Abomination was Notch, still floating gracefully, but with his wand pointed at Abomination with one hand, while a fire dragon was coming out of the wand and flying towards the Abomination. So this, Notch's other hand was moving, forming layers of earth to trap the trapped Abomination in addition to creating a dome around the monster. Abomination's skin is very thick and fire wasn't doing as much damage to him as Tony's lasers, but fire had another characteristic: it burned oxygen. In just 15 seconds the fire dragon was able to extinguish all the oxygen in the vicinity of the Abomination, and in another 15 seconds the large monster that did not stop moving fell to the ground unconscious. Alex didn't need to hurt Abomination, he just needed to trap this monster and use fire to make him breathless. That way he didn't need to spend a lot of GP with very powerful powers and could save that for Elder Scrolls Warcraft and the Battle of New York that was coming. Looking around, Notch saw that there were some military helicopters approaching and he had an idea. If Hulk can play Minecraft, maybe Abomination can too. Thinking about it, Notch felt that this idea was more and more interesting and he decided to take Abomination with him to his mountain. There he could place Abomination in Oasis, and when the Battle of New York arrives, he could release the monster to fight aliens and unleash all his rage. Thus, the rival that Hulk did not meet in this life was on his way to meet him in Azeroth. When the battle was over, Notch didn't stay long and just gave the news helicopter a smile and teleported away with Abomination. Seeing how Notch disappeared, viewers who were watching the broadcast were much calmer and safer, while the military was enraged. Damn it, who gave Notch the right to catch that monster? This monster was made by us. Maybe by studying his body it's possible to make a perfect formula. General Ross roared angrily in the helicopter, completely ignoring the destruction this test of theirs caused. Tony Stark, on the other hand, was looking at where Notch was standing with a lost expression. I spent so long trying to knock this monster out. Notch just starved it of oxygen and the monster passed out. Why didn't I think of that before? Tony thought. Tony, hey Notch, thanks for the help. Despite being a little frustrated, Tony still thanked Notch, since without Notch's help, the damage, destruction and chaos that this monster would cause in NY would be colossal. Notch, don't worry, it wasn't difficult. Damn, I saw it wasn't difficult. Tony complained mentally. Tony, but what do you intend to do with that monster's body? Tony asked worriedly. He didn't know what Notch's intentions were in taking this monster somewhere else, since if Notch decided to release this monster in a crowded place, the chaos this monster would cause would be even greater than the chaos caused today. Notch, I know another big guy like him. I think the two can make friends. I'm taking this big guy here so they can get to know each other. Reading that response, Tony finally felt calmer, despite still being surprised by Notch. Notch knows another giant monster like today. Tony wondered. If there are other monsters like this, then maybe there are other things even more dangerous. Thinking about it, Tony started to reconsider if his armor was as powerful as he imagined. I think I have to start developing more armor. Having the right armor at the right time can save my life. With Tony becoming worried about possible enemies he would have to face in the future and that maybe his armor wasn't powerful enough, Alex just left the Abomination unconscious in one of the rooms in Bumblebee's big house with a computer with Oasis in it while he locked everything from the outside. Although Abomination was very powerful, his potential was nowhere near as powerful as Hulk's, who had no limits, which allowed a well-reinforced wall to easily hold him back. Looking at B, who was playing in Oasis at the time, Alex just smiled and walked back home. It was fun to stretch those muscles in the real world, Alex thought as his appearance returned to normal. I think dressing up as Notch was a good idea. Nobody will suspect that I have another face, as my face as Notch will always be visible, meanwhile I can keep my Alex identity safe. Looking at the Elder Scrolls Warcraft that was already done and the news helicopter that had been filming his battle a few minutes ago, Alex had an idea. Entering Oasis, Alex logged in as Notch and posted to the game's forum, which he had practically turned into a Twitter feed for Oasis players. Notch. Hello everyone, did you see today's battle? The Fire Dragon spell I used will also be available for mages to use in Elder Scrolls Warcraft. Just like the other classes will also have very interesting skills, hehe. Since everyone who played Oasis had a forum account and almost everyone who played followed Notch, Notch currently had nearly 1 billion followers on the game's forum. As soon as his post was released, and with the translation into every language in the world, in just a few seconds the amount of likes had already passed 50,000, and that number was rising extremely fast. 100k, 200k, 500k, 800k, 1m. The likes kept going up and the comments were also going up quickly. Among the hundreds of thousands of comments, the comment that stood out the most was from a smart player. Stranger. The Oasis School of Witchcraft and Wizardry will welcome new players who want to join us to learn magic. That comment alone had over 100,000 likes from players interested in joining the magic school, which made Stranger cold thinking about what he would say to the older brothers of the magic school when they found out that so many people wanted to join because of him. Ancient One Pav. Looking at her cell phone, which had the Oasis forum app downloaded, the Ancient One was shocked by Stranger's comment. He's touting another school of magic, will he still join Kamar Taj in the future? Even though Oasis, School of Magic is a subordinate of Kamar Taj made by Wong, isn't the identity a little broken? Pav ends. Alex nearly died laughing when he saw Stranger's comment and wondered how the Ancient One was reacting to it. But seeing the amount of people wanting to pre-order Elder Scrolls Warcraft, Alex felt it was about time to release the game to players. Then, within order to Oasis, Elder Scrolls Warcraft castles began to be reworked, a date finally appeared, and players around the world shivered as they imagined being able to unleash spells as incredible as Notch did in that battle. Alex had set Elder Scrolls Warcraft to release in 3 days, which was enough for hundreds of thousands of people to lose sleep and millions to have difficulty focusing on studies and work because they kept thinking about this magical game that would to emerge. But what surprised Alex most was a rather unexpected appearance. As he had read many MMORPG-themed novels in his previous life, a very common thing was that big companies in the real world would invest millions of dollars to make a guild in the game too, since in those novels the games were so developed that the game economy could even affect the real-world economy. Not to mention the publicity that these big companies received for being giant guilds in those games, that was something priceless. Of course, for there to be big guilds, there had to be millions of small guilds as well, and that's where the big guilds came into their own. Looking at the Oasis report on the guilds that were already forming, Alex found some familiar names. Black Panther Guild. Guild made 98% of players with Wakanda IP. Current leader, Shuri, the princess of the Kingdom of Wakanda. Current trend, Horde. Osborne Guild. Guild made by players from different regions of the USA, composed of diverse talents in the most diverse areas. Current leader, Norman Osborn. Current trend, Alliance. Asgard Palace. Guild made by the 5 Asgardians who came to Earth and with more other drinking friends and powerful warriors that the Asgardians found. Current leader, Thor Odinson. Current trend, Alliance. Ned's Kingdom. Guild made by Ned, Peter and Hulk, plus thousands of Ned's followers. Current leader, Ned Leeds. Current trend, Horde. X Guild. Looking at the list of guilds, Alex was surprised that the Horde was competing very closely with the Alliance in terms of interest. Since in the first races of the game, Alex had to admit that the Alliance races were much prettier, while the Horde races were much more brutish and savage. But considering that people saw it as a game, maybe more different races like the Horde seemed a lot more fun and interesting. After all, experiencing the game as a human would be like experiencing a medieval movie that they've seen hundreds of times, but experiencing that as a race of the Horde would be like experiencing something completely new. The 3 days of warming up for Elder Scrolls Warcraft passed very quickly. With the data in hand, what surprised Alex the most was that the largest guild of each faction was Ned's Kingdom in the Horde with 371,000 players in the forum they made, and in Alliance it was the Magic School with Stranger as the guild leader, which had 411,000 players. Apparently my demonstration of magic in the battle against the Abomination greatly increased players' interest in the magic classes in the game. Alex soon understood the reason for this magic school's rapid growth. Stopping looking at the data in front of him and turning his gaze to the side, Alex asked who was next to him. "And you, have you decided which faction you will be part of?" Hearing Oli's question, the person looked at him angrily and replied rudely, "I won't play that." Alex imagined this response and projected a floating image in front of that person. In the floating image there was a big player with green skin and a red shirt surrounded by other players. The Hulk is currently one of the most famous figures in the Horde. But before Alex finished speaking, the other person interrupted him. "I'm going to be from the Horde," Abomination said with determination and fanaticism on his face. "Do you want to join the Hulk?" Alex asked with a half-smile at the corner of his mouth. Abomination was furious as he denied it. "Never. I will fight the Hulk and defeat him every chance I get until I take away everything he has." Alex just nodded and let that matter go. He could feel that Abomination wasn't being 100% truthful in what he said, but that time would show what was right or wrong. With 5 minutes left until the scheduled launch time of Elder Scrolls Warcraft, millions of people gathered in front of the game's castles across all Oasis hubs. Players who weren't that interested in the game and just came to see what it would look like even felt a little dumbfounded and considered whether they should try out the game that so many people have been wanting to play. With that, more and more players arrived, and if this wasn't a game, but the real world, these people would be extremely hot and practically deaf because of the noise of so many people talking. But luckily this was Oasis. Despite having millions of players gathered, the temperature was still comfortable for everyone, and an anti-noise game setting was automatically activated when a certain amount of players gathered so that it didn't affect the other players too much, to the point that even with millions of people together, the noise that reached the players was like there were only a few hundred people talking around. That was still considerable noise, but still a lot more comfortable than listening to millions of people talking so close together. Suddenly, on top of every castle in the hundreds of Oasis hubs, various figures appeared. From the blue side of the castle, a blonde human in golden armor decorated with several lions' heads emerged, followed by a few dozen soldiers of different races wearing lion armor. Once they reached the top of the blue side of the castle, the millions of players in front of each castle cheered as they clapped their hands. "For the ALIANCE! For the ALIANCE! For the ALIANCE!" Hearing the players shout, the blonde man in the center of the soldiers smiled as he nodded his head proudly. But before the Horde players could complain, on the other side of the castle, where everything was red and black, some figures also appeared. At the front of the group was a green-skinned orc with a large spiked armor made of bronze and a large hammer in his hand. Because of his height of nearly 3 meters and the fierce expression he had on his face, even the Alliance players were shocked as they looked at that huge monster. Behind that orc, dozens of soldiers followed with similar but less prestigious armor. Looking at the group that just arrived, the players started screaming again. "For the Horde! For the Horde! For the Horde!" Unlike the human who smiled and waved at the players, the orc just nodded and looked at the human with a sneering expression. Seeing this, the Alliance players felt that their pride had been hurt and they started screaming even louder. "For the ALIANCE! For the Horde! For the..." With the screams of millions of players, everyone felt their blood boil, and unbeknownst to them, the Oasis system was calculating the players' enthusiasm and generating results for the first invisible battle between Horde and Alliance. The more players from one faction screamed, the more players from the other faction wanted to scream even more. At one point there was even a player who bought a megaphone from the in-game store and used it to scream even louder, which prompted other players to buy, and before long there were thousands of players with megaphones screaming at every hub. The willingness of these players to scream even surprised the human and orc a bit, but they didn't show it and just watched for 2 minutes. When players started to have more and more crazy ideas, where cars with very powerful sound systems were arriving with players wearing microphones on top while shouting their faction, a single action by the 2 leaders on top of each castle made the players silent. As if they had agreed something, the human and the orc raised their right hand, and when the players saw this, the silence that followed was frightening. From unbridled screaming to absolute silence, this process took less than 3 seconds, leaving players who just came to watch with curiosity shocked. Although most of these players had human appearance, the orc didn't look at it with distaste, as he knew that those players with Horde hearts would be converted into Horde races in no time. As for the human, seeing these human players who wanted to join the Horde, he could only shake his head in disappointment, but he knew that this was not the fault of these people who did not understand anything about Azeroth. Suddenly, a projection appeared in the center, between the 2 leaders. A person with a height of 2.20 meters, long black hair wearing a red royal robe. Among that person's long black hair, one could see a long ear sticking out, in the same direction as that person's long eyebrows. To the players who were here, this person looked like a cross between a human and a night elf. To WoW players from Alex's previous world, they would soon recognize that this player was from the Blood Elf race, which was formerly known as the High Elf. Despite the appearance having slight differences, players quickly recognized this elf as a very familiar figure. Notch. A player screamed excitedly when he saw Notch in person for the first time. Despite Notch having already made several in-person appearances, many thousands of new players were joining Oasis every day, which meant that many players had yet to see Notch in person. With a polite smile on his face, Notch waved at that player and raised his hand to calm the crowd. He had chosen the Blood Elf because it was the race that could best become familiar with the Horde and the Alliance, since initially the High Elves were closer to the Alliance, until they were betrayed and moved to the Horde. But no one knew any of that for now, just a few little hints he slipped into the Easter egg books that were scattered across Oasis. Dear players, welcome to the official opening of Elder Scrolls Warcraft, a new world with infinite possibilities, where everyone can choose between different classes, among these, the warrior. When Notch said that, a powerful orc warrior and an imposing human warrior appeared beside him, followed by each of the 8 races, showing the difference of each race when using the armors. Seeing all races come forward, all the players shouted in excitement. A mage. For this, only 4 races came, being them the human, and gnome of the Alliance and the troll and the undead of the Horde. When these races appeared, the players who wanted to be part of these races were the ones who screamed the most, especially the players who wanted to be human. A shaman. When Notch said that, only 3 Horde races moved, which made the Horde players scream frantically. A paladin. This time it was the turn of the Alliance players to shout excitedly to see the humans and dwarfs come forward with white and gold armor. A hunter. As Notch introduced the classes, players around the world who were unable to log into Oasis due to having to work that day had gathered with other colleagues to watch the livestream on Mojang's official Twitch channel. Even though there were hundreds of millions of players watching in person on Oasis, on Mojang's livestream there were still nearly 200 million players connected watching and commenting. In an ordinary office in upstate Chicago, Jackson, a 29-year-old man, was watching the livestream surrounded by his coworkers. As their boss had never tried Oasis, he didn't think it was important to give them a holiday to watch the game launch in person, which caused a lot of frustration among employees. So they huddled together to watch it on Jackson's computer. Even other employees who never followed much about Oasis joined in to watch, as they were intrigued by their colleagues' excitement. Damn it, the Horde can't be paladins. Jackson said in frustration after seeing how beautiful the paladins' armor was. Are you complaining about this? I had already made up a story for the Night Elf Shaman that I was going to do, now this whole story will have to be thrown in the trash, a woman said in disappointment. Story. You are making a story for your character, why? Another woman asked in surprise. I was exploring the taverns in Hub 32 and I met a group there. They were a group of players who were planning to make a roleplay guild, where all players would create stories for their characters in Azeroth, and when they entered the game, everyone would act on that story, as if they were the characters there instead of us. The woman explained excitedly. I had done a night elf that when she was a child was attacked by a bear, but when the bear was going to kill her, a spirit came and saved her, earning her friendship, so she decided that when she was an adult, she would embark on a journey to better understand the spirits and become a shaman. But now, I think I'm going to have to change this story a little. Hearing the woman's explanation, all the other classmates were shocked, even those who were not players, when they imagined that they could make a character's story and that they could act like the characters as if they were in another life. It made these people's hearts hit harder. Even players who didn't play Oasis started to imagine a story they could do and got really excited as they thought how cool it would be to live such a life. Scenes like this were popping up all over the world, and unbeknownst to Alex, the Elder Scrolls Warcraft PR community was getting a lot bigger than he realized. Unlike WoW, where the vast majority of the RP community was concentrated only in Goldshire, in Elder Scrolls Warcraft the RP community would be all over the world. Fortunately, just as he had seen in FFXIV in the previous life, Alex added a RP tag so his players could recognize each other and interact with other players who were in RP more easily. Finally, after introducing all 9 classes that would be released with the game, Notch said something. Of course, if your race manages to become a mage, nothing will stop you from learning wizard spells too. Haha, welcome to Free Azeroth, welcome to Elder Scrolls Warcraft. Whoa! The players screamed in excitement when they saw the castle gates opening. Among the most excited players to play, Hulk was one of the top players. As soon as the gates opened, he entered the castle with Peter and Ned at his side. Entering the castle, what they saw were 16 statues, 8 on one side that showed the 4 alliance races with the 2 genders available, and the 4 horde races with the 2 genders available as well. Many players were still confused about what they would choose, but Hulk had no doubts as he walked to the portal that led to the Horde side. As soon as he walked through the portal, Hulk felt an oddly familiar feeling. He had been teleported to a white space, where in front of him was the cup of an orc warrior. Looking at that body, Hulk wanted to reach out to touch it, but his hand just crossed the orc's body, making Hulk understand that he was in an ethereal state. It was like when he was in Bruce's consciousness, where he knew that body was his too, but he had no control over it. Until at a thought of him, the orc's bald head suddenly changed into a hairstyle much like his own. Astonished, Hulk thought that the orc would look cooler if he were bigger and more muscular, and just as he imagined, the orc's body turned out exactly as Hulk had imagined. Of course, only with a limitation on height because the race did not allow orcs over 5 meters tall. But seeing how he managed to customize the body of that orc, Hulk got very excited and started using his mind to make the orc more and more like him. Since Hulk's thoughts were still very simple, because of his mentality that was like that of a child, the Oasis system had to deduce a lot of things he was thinking and use the closest approximation of what it was able to deduce to do the orc's body as Hulk was imagining it. Some details were still a little different from how he imagined it, but for Hulk, looking at such an imposing and powerful version of himself, for him it was perfect. Confirming that he wanted the body this way, Hulk felt that the blank room was getting darker and darker until his vision was blurred. Feeling a little wind brushing his body, Hulk was surprised and tried to open his eyes harder, until he finally managed to open them. Looking around, Hulk found himself in a rustic tent. Confused, he saw that he had gotten up from a sleeping bag on the floor and around him were hundreds of other bags just like his own. Just as he woke up, other orcs were also waking up confused as they looked around, but they had something in common. besides the confused expression, it was possible to see that these orcs were all very excited. Hulk looked down at his hands and was overjoyed to see those muscular green hands he was so familiar with. Clenching his fists, Hulk felt a strength much stronger than he had in other Mojang games, a strength that finally made him more comfortable. This strength was nowhere near his original strength, but Hulk felt very happy to see his strength recovering in this body. Suddenly, when a few dozen players had woken up, the fabric covering the entrance to the tent opened, revealing a powerful orc wearing a shaman outfit, followed by a delicate female orc a little smaller than him. Although the word, delicate, was used to describe this female orc, that was only in comparison to the male orcs, as her 8-foot height was no joke, let alone the tight, toned muscles that lay ahead, shows between her armor. It looks like some of these soldiers have already woken up, that's great. The man in the shaman outfit entered while looking at the orcs who had just woken up. Since you were in a coma for the last few hours, I believe you don't remember well what's going on. You were the orcs injured in the last monster invasion of the Valley of Trials. Unfortunately, thousands of our comrades died in battle, while you stayed wounded. Luckily it still holds your lives. The orc explained. Don't think that our battle is over. Another wave of monsters will come in a short time and those who are able to battle will need to help us deal with these monsters. The survival of our valley depends on you young fighters. The Hulk will fight. Hulk was the first to respond, causing the other amazed players to also make an effort to stand up and declare that they were ready for battle. Seeing the passion for battle of these young orcs, who despite being injured, still wanted to fight and protect the valley from them, the orc shaman gave a satisfied smile as he spoke to the female orc beside him. Gona Quickfall, I will leave this group of young men to fight in your hands. I hope you will help them prepare for the upcoming battle to the best of your ability. Hearing that, the female orc nodded her head and replied in a military tone. Don't worry sir, I'll do my best. As more and more players woke up around them, the players who were already awake took the opportunity to familiarize themselves with their new bodies and prepare to start their adventurous journey in this new world. Scenes like this were happening in every small town across Azeroth, on both the Horde and Alliance sides. Initially Alex thought of making the players spawn just like in the original game, but thinking about the confusion and chaos that this would generate because this game is a VR MMORPG with touch physics, he quickly gave up on this idea and came up with a new plan for the beginning of the players in this world. Using ideas from anime and novels he read in his previous life, Notch decided to make the NPCs and players have independent stories, making each being unique, thus making the world more realistic and immersive. Each player would start in a small town and the more he advanced, the stronger he would get until when they finally reached the capital, the power of the players was already much greater. Of course, Alex distributed a lot more resources around the world and enlarged the original game map several times, so the world would really look realistic and could accommodate the millions of players that appeared without the structure of the world being affected. Seeing the many different scenes happening around the world, Alex smiled as he thought about how he could go about turning these players into the next human army against Thanos invasion. The total amount of players in all of Elder Scrolls Warcraft in the first 60 minutes was over 600 million. Considering the release of the game was done at a time when many people were working on one side of the world, and other people had to sleep on the other side of the world, it was an overwhelming achievement. Alex was confident that Elder Scrolls Warcraft would at some point reach the 1 billion players online mark simultaneously. As the monthly fee for the game averaged $10 worldwide, Elder Scrolls Warcraft players alone would be enough to earn Alex billions of dollars every month. Considering that hundreds millions of players pre-ordered the game, Alex is going to earn more than 50 million GP monthly on ESW, not even considering the earnings he had with the other games. With that gigantic amount of points, Alex decided to divide it into two fronts. Despite being confident of being able to defend Earth from Thanos virtually single-handedly when he arrived, Alex felt that getting humans to develop further to the point where even ordinary people could help would be something much more feasible from an investor's perspective. Imagining the scene where the Chidori army arrived and thousands of ordinary people used skills and spells from Elder Scrolls, Warcraft, even people who weren't interested in the game would be willing to play to get enough strength to protect themselves in case of another invasion, and those people who experienced the battle would be even more addicted to this feeling of strength that they would want to play even more to fight even better in the future. Where on one side Alex would use all his power to defeat the enemy army, gaining the adoration of some people, or on the other side where people would use Alex's game to fight and arouse the envy of those who didn't play yet, thinking in the long term the second tactic was infinitely better. Of course, Alex didn't intend to give up on developing his own strength, since he knew that he was the center of it all and that without him everything would be destroyed, so getting stronger was indispensable. Therefore, Alex decided to divide the GPs he won from the games into 3 parts. The first part was equivalent to 50% of the GPs earned every month and would be used to improve personal strength, with a monthly flow of at least 50 million GP adding all games and Oasis. This first part would be at least 25 million GP for him to use every month. The second part was equivalent to 35% of GPs earned every month and would be used to develop and for players to redeem their powers in real life. Of course, as this amount of GP would probably not be able to meet the demand of players wanting to redeem their powers for real life, Alex made a queue system for redemption where players could pay to pass the queue, which was actually just converting their money in GP and let them redeem the powers immediately, while players with VIP in Oasis would have the price to cut the queue reduced, making the VIP in Oasis receive new subscribers and thus earn even more GP. By Alex's plan, all the GP generated by the Oasis VIP would be converted to the GP fund for redeeming ESW powers. As for the third part of the GPs that Alex intended to spread, it would be equivalent to 15% of the income from the games and would be used by him for maintenance and development for the new games. That way, Alex would be able to balance all of his GP spending going forward without compromising any of his future opportunities. Thinking like a traditional company, it's as if Alex were a CEO who takes 50% of the profits, spends 35% on marketing and 15% on maintenance and new product development. Looking at the almost 10 million GP available on his account, Alex was very tempted to spend all of that on a new skill right away, but he controlled himself and just bought some more practical skills. Basic Elements Control Proficiency, Master 1 million GP. Proficiency in Controlling and Developing Magic Circles, Grandmaster 2 million. Mana Pool Upgrade, Master 2.000.000 GP. These abilities complemented Alex's control over the abilities he already had. Proficiency in Controlling and Developing Magic Circles was purchased by him to enhance Grey Fullbuster Ice Magic. With the new ability, Alex felt that Grey's Ice Magic had been enhanced to a much higher level than Dragon Slayer's magic, especially in his mind, which now understood magic circles at a Grandmaster level. Since Alex had the creativity to create something with ice, he could modify or make a magic circle on the spot to accomplish what he envisioned. Not to mention that with the abilities to control the 4 elements that he bought from Avatar, added with proficiency in controlling and developing magic circles and proficiency in controlling basic elements, Master Alex was able to use these 2 skills to make spells of all basic elements without any difficulty. If he wanted to, he could even summon a powerful fire phoenix like Kael'thas's Alar in WoW to fight alongside him while summoning a gigantic earth colossus, an ice dragon, an eastern water dragon, and more. Everything he could imagine. Especially with his mana pool upgrade that was as big as a gigantic lake, Alex had absolute confidence in the fight against the Chidori army. He even had plans to go meet Thanos for a moment. But thinking about the strength of that man and the possible hidden cards he might have, Alex quickly abandoned that idea and decided to continue on Earth by quietly increasing his strength. Curious about how the outside world was at that moment, Alex took out his cell phone and saw that there were several messages and missed calls from Anna inviting him to play ESW with her. Thinking this would be fun, Alex quickly answered her and decided to also join her group to play. Nunu note. I know a lot of readers don't like the way I upgrade Alex's strength, Many complain about wasting GP, others complain about making no sense the price of GP skills Alex is seeing. I'm sorry, every moment I think about how I can develop this without Alex becoming the OAA in just a few chapters, but at the same time he has a fair strength progression with the system and with his GPs while I think about the future powers he may have and the price figures those powers will have in the future. I hope you will bear with me and continue to support my story. Hugs. NunuXD. With the release of ESW, the world practically stopped. There were even holidays at the launch of the game in most companies where the owners were more tech-savvy. Governments and militaries sent teams to get in the game and try to understand this new world as quickly as possible, as well as trying to figure out the best way to benefit their country with this new world that was emerging. From what they've discovered so far, guilds were the biggest publicity the game had had to date. Especially when they discovered that there were ranks in the game, both ranks of players with the highest level so far, as ranks of equipment, players who killed the most players from other factions, among other ranks that were not yet unlocked. Mr. President, if we can get some of our military to master parts of the ESW ranks, the likelihood of young people enlisting in the military in the future will be much higher, especially if we use this as a marketing ploy and describe it as because of the training in the army and the discipline we teach these soldiers achieved the high rank. An army general said in a respectful tone. Hearing what the general said, the president nodded his head and asked, "Has there been any changes since we started posting our superiority in Fortnite?" "Yes, Sir President, since we started to win a lot in Fortnite and with the ranked game system, young teenagers have been fascinated by us and the youth favorability rate for the army has gone up by 13% in the last few months, an increase almost impossible in a time of peace as we are now." The general responded excitedly, as it was his idea for them to invest some elite teams to get army fame in Fortnite. Very well, as Fortnite has already brought us satisfactory results, we will be able to continue with this strategy for ESW as well. The president agreed. My nephew told me that normally in this type of game there are guilds, with member limits, and affiliated guilds, where it would be something like a training center for newer players to be able to keep up with the main guild. We can use this as a tactic to approach even more players, creating a military guild, and making affiliated guilds where ordinary players can enter. If any of them has a notorious performance, he can be promoted to the main guild and even get an official position in the army, so we will attract even more public interest while our image in their eyes will become even better. Hearing what the president said, not only was the general he was talking to surprised, but also the other councillors and generals at the table were shocked. That's a great idea, Mr. President. Councillors got their eyes shining thinking about it. Looking at the man with a proud expression, the councillors thought that he really deserved to have won the last election. Little did they know that this idea actually came from his nephew, who had already seen some similar posts on the internet and decided to give the idea to his uncle. As the president's nephew saw this, obviously other governments around the world saw it too and decided to follow the same strategy. So when news broke at the Oasis forum that governments around the world were looking at talented ESW players with a view to hiring them in the future with high salaries, the amount of people trying out ESW increased even more. Especially in poorer people, who saw a rare opportunity to earn money without needing a powerful past. Of course, the government wasn't the only one who had this idea, even large corporations like Stark Industries and Oscorp also joined the idea, promising even higher salaries than government corporations. As a result, the players were divided. On the one hand there were large companies with high salaries, on the other hand there were governments with lower salaries but greater prestige and stability. Many people had different goals and choices in life, so everyone's decision was different, but Alex saw that all of this was only adding to the amount of new players experiencing Oasis. With Oasis being the free gateway to other games, Alex was confident that the technology and fun that came with Oasis would be enough to convert these free-to-players into pay-to-players. Speaking like that, it even seemed like a bad thing, but as Mojang's games didn't have any pay-to-win aspect, Alex didn't feel bad at any time when adopting psychological tactics for these players to feel more tempted to pay. Since if they didn't pay they would have a lot of content available for free, and if they paid they wouldn't be at a loss, since the benefits were so good that players wouldn't regret it later. Especially when he looked at how low the amount of players canceling the VIP they had in games was. From the results of the cancellation form they answered, more than 90% of the cancellations were just because the player's financial situation had changed, whether the player was fired or there was some emergency and he needed money and couldn't spend it with the VIP in the game. Using the AI he got from system to administer Oasis to understand these players, when the AI was sure that the reason for the cancellation was indeed that, Alex even put that these players would receive another 30 days of free VIP and that Mojang wished them luck in the future, which warmed the hearts of the players to the point that the image of Mojang as a conscious company that did not seek small profits was carved in the minds of these players. Many even sent thank you emails to Mojang in Oasis saying that as soon as their financial condition improved they would go back to paying VIP to thank the company for being sensitive to them. Of course, for players who saw others thanking them for this and tried to unsubscribe to get another month free, Mojang just acted as if nothing had happened and let those players cancel the subscription with no problem, but didn't give those players any either message and no free VIP extra days. Outraged, many people even went so far as to vilify Mojang by posting on the Oasis forum complaining that they were being treated differently than other players, as many players got 30 days of free VIP while they got nothing. The community even saw this and was outraged by these players, but Mojang's response was quick. We at Mojang apologize for the inconvenience to all players. About the question that the player raised in this forum, our Oasis system has an anti-fraud method where players who are with malicious intent can be identified. Only players who are really going through difficult times will receive our condolences and the free 30 days of VIP. Those players who do not have this problem will be treated normally and will not receive any benefit from our company. If players are still not satisfied with our conduct of treating players differently, we can only say goodbye to these people and understand that they may prefer to play other companies' games. Sincerely, Mojang PR team. When players saw Mojang's response, they were stunned and quickly understood what was going on. Damn, these guys are not in financial trouble and still want to take the benefits that these people in difficult times are receiving. I've screenshotted everyone who made malicious posts like these. Let's all block these people. What ungrateful people. Seeing the last paragraph of Mojang's post, the other companies were overjoyed. Usually companies just put their heads down and treat players like gods so they keep playing their games, of course, besides the part that they monetize everything possible. So seeing how indifferent Mojang was with these players, these companies that were already on the verge of bankruptcy, felt that they were very lucky and that the amount of players they would soon increase. But much to their frustration, the amount of players just continued to drop, just like in previous months. What a joke, what player would stop playing Mojang games to go to these pay-to-win games from these other companies? Even the players who attacked Mojang just deleted their posts and pretended nothing happened. While this fight was going on in the forums, most of the players still didn't find out, since everyone was very focused on Elder Scrolls Warcraft, especially when they saw that the first player to reach level 2 had appeared. Unlike other MMORPGs that existed in the world where the player only needed to play for a few seconds to reach level 2, in ESW Alex made the leveling much slower, even slower than WoW Classic. Of course, it didn't make quest rewards extremely low, as the dopamine that players received would be greatly affected by this. The way he did it was quite simple. While in a traditional MMORPG the player takes just a few seconds to leave the city and go to the field to kill the monsters, in ESW where the world had a realistic size this route took several minutes, just like in real life. In normal games the player found groups of monsters and could kill as many as they wanted without worrying about anything. In ESW Alex worried about making the atmosphere more realistic and the monsters were in more distant and realistic places, since it wouldn't make sense for monsters to walk back and forth around the cities while the guards just stood by and watched. Even the battles were longer, as the monsters were almost as powerful as the players and the players needed some time to recover after a battle. And with the huge amount of players starting to play, the monster hunting zones were also very crowded, which made it difficult for players to kill enough monsters to be able to level up. But despite all the difficulties, the players were loving it. The fulfillment that players felt when killing a monster was much greater. Turning in a quest and feeling a comfortable energy permeate their body was also wonderful, and all this with the fun that was seeing people from all over the world having fun around gave a unique experience for these players. Alex was currently in character 8 playing with Anna, Kitty, Kurt, Scott and Jean. To play together, everyone created night elf characters. Unlike the orcs who woke up in a city that was being attacked, their group woke up in a peaceful night elf small town with the background that they were elves selected to train to become the small town's warriors. But for now, they were still in a selection process where only the best would be selected to learn from the city's true night elf warriors. Of course, only Alex knew that there would also be a possibility for the players to learn some hidden skills. Just like Skyrim had skill books in different locations that the player could learn after fulfilling certain requirements, Alex also added this in ESW, where players could learn some secret skills if they met certain requirements in the game, which would greatly increase the sense of exploitation of the players, with the expectation that some quest could yield something hidden that would give them some advantage. Despite the player choosing a class at the beginning, Alex never intended to limit players to getting abilities from other classes, but of course, getting those abilities and using them effectively would be much more difficult than the abilities of the classes the players initially chose. In their group, Anna and Kurt became rogues, Jean chose to be a druid, Kitty decided to be a priest to help the group, while Scott was with a lot of doubt between warrior and hunter, but thinking that being a warrior he could seem cooler to Jean, Scott decided to become a warrior, leaving Hunter to Alex, thus making their group complete with all night elf classes. Alex found it ironic that the class he was left with was his favorite class in his previous life, as he had a hobby of collecting the most beautiful beasts like Hunter in the game and combining those beasts with his armors and mounts, so he was happy therefore. The group had already been playing for an hour and a half and by that time they were in a forest hunting imps. Imps were small creatures with red skin and humanoid bodies with intermediate intelligence. They couldn't speak, but they were smart enough to make camps. Looking at the imp camp in the distance, Kurt got a little concerned and asked as he held up his 2 daggers. "Do we attack this? Has anyone figured out the death penalty yet?" Jean asked as she looked at Kitty. Kitty had a menu floating in front of her face, which was a screen showing the game's forum. Apparently, when a player dies at level 1, their entire experience bar will be reset in addition to being prevented from playing for 1 hour. And from what I'm seeing from players talking, some say they lost some copper coins when they died, but not everybody. Kitty said while looking at the forum. Hearing that, Anna looked at Alex. "What do you think, Alex?" Hearing Anna ask Alex, everyone else also turned and looked at him expectantly. Even though they played for an hour longer than Alex, as he only logged in after them while he was looking at the game's stats, with just a few pieces of information that Alex derived, their efficiency in killing monsters and gaining experience increased. Very. Mainly because Alex was very good at Fortnite and because he was also wearing a black cape like theirs, they already had the belief that he was a hardcore player who had much more knowledge than them in games. In ESW everyone also had the black covers with the design of the head of Ender Dragon. Since all the games were from Mojang, Alex decided to continue with the tradition that the covers of the games could be used in other games. Even the skins that players won in Fortnite tournaments could be taken to Minecraft or ESW, which made the impression of players' skins become something more sacred and prestigious. Even the skins that players received in Minecraft's Hypixel Defense, which was initially something very common, which everyone had, was now extremely rare, as only a few million out of over a billion players had it. Alex looked at their equipment and thought that their team was very efficient at using class skills, as they were used to using skills from their powers in real life, and felt that it would be okay to try to attack the camp of the imps. As he knew the difficulty of the camp, he judged that it would not be impossible for them to get there. Of course, if it was a group of ordinary players, they would need at least 10 to 15 people level 1 to hack this without dying, but considering their level, it would be challenging, but not impossible. It's a risk, but considering that the greater the risk the greater the reward, I think we can do it. In the worst case we can only get more experience again since we are only level 1. Alex said as he looked at everyone. Despite all being night elves, each one had their own characteristics, with Anna having short black hair, Kurt having blue hair, Jean with red hair, Scott with red eyes, and Kitty with twin tails hair, of course, he with white hair, already that he felt they matched, so even though they were all in different bodies, it was still pretty clear who was who because they all still had characteristics of them in real life. Then let's try, Scott said excitedly. He loved fighting with the sword, as he mostly attacked from afar with his powers in real life. It was a very new experience to use this new means of combat in the game. Even for the others, who felt like they got new powers and were really excited to experience everything. Amidst Scott's excitement, he inadvertently glanced at Jean, wanting to see her reaction, but seeing that she still acted casually treating him like the others, he felt a little let down. Alex noticed that and shook his head. In his time living with the group and with his previous knowledge of this world, he had already noticed that Scott liked Jean, but unlike the comics where she was dating a boy named Duncan, in this world she wasn't dating anyone and just acted like she didn't understand the hints Scott was giving her. Looks at Anna who had a cute smile on her face. Alex stopped thinking about the relationship problems of these two and smiled at his girlfriend. With his increasing proficiency in magic and elemental control, Alex felt that the time was coming when he could do more with Anna than just hold her hand and give her a quick peck. What he didn't notice was the look Jean gave him after shaking her head and pretending she hadn't noticed Scott's gaze. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.